Chapter 295. What happened in Divine Sky City couldn't be covered up. Just like what Chi-Yu said, the news had spread across the entire God world in less than a day. The most talked about were the following few sentences. Goddess Taiyuan appeared in Divine Sky City, receptive spirit godly body appeared, Qi family fought for the godly body and Linghong sword, but failed miserably. A few short sentences covered everything that happened that day. It could be said that Qi family had successfully stirred up a storm, causing more than half of the hidden ancient forces in God world to become active. Although many of the younger generation didn't know what receptive spirit godly body was, the older generation, those extremely ancient living fossils, those who had lived for hundreds of thousands of years, and those who were from the previous era or even a few eras before, knew what it meant. It was compatible with the energy of all things in the world. It was an ultimate power, and it was the king of all body types. In God world, it was also a symbol of disaster. Every time a receptive spirit godly body appeared, the entire world would be in a bloodbath because of this mysterious body type. The Qi family's collective attack on Yun Nuoshing wouldn't be the last time. Is this generation's receptive spirit godly body appearing again? The world is going to be in turmoil again. I wonder what level this generation's receptive spirit godly body is at. I really want to see the day when that kid achieves great success. Hey! The receptive spirit godly body can't move an inch in initial God level. Great success? It doesn't exist. Many hidden ancient forces are about to appear. The receptive spirit godly body is the most special body type, and the best energy carrier. The previous generation's receptive spirit godly body had just achieved great success, but he was attacked by many forces and was dismembered. His ending was tragic. The place where the previous generation's receptive spirit godly body died is a strange place. So what? The origin of the receptive spirit godly body can't fall into anyone's hands. Even if the godly body risked his life, he could still destroy the origin, causing those who coveted it to lose everything. Those ancient forces all know about it. However, who knows if they have found a way to cool down the receptive spirit godly body's origin after so many years. The receptive spirit godly body is born from nature and is the king of all bodies. It is protected by nature, and only one is born after countless years. Destroying it will hurt the harmony of nature, and it will be punished by nature. But it's hard to move the godly body. The Yuan family wants to protect the divine body. You guys weren't there that day, so you don't know. The elders of the Yuan family said that they will protect the divine body. If you want to touch the divine body, you have to go through them first. The Yuan family is also an extremely ancient force. If you want to make a move against them, those people from other ancient forces will have to think twice. Although they said that, who knows what the Yuan family is thinking? They might protect him 1 second and kill him in the next to take the origin of his god body. This thing is enough to tempt them to take action. Even if that's the case, the Yuan family might not be able to protect their divine body. Even the Yuan family would have to avoid the attacks of so many great forces. Moreover, the Qi family is also eyeing them covetously. It's hard to say. The divine body has many divine weapons. It's not weaker than a god. You don't know, but the third elder of the Qi clan had one of his hands crippled. He's an emperor of the underworld, a top existence in the world. How could he be crippled so easily? Is the divine body trying to go against the flow and slay the gods? I wonder what the other 7 of the 8 ancient families and the 9 divine temples think. They are the most important forces in this war. If they also want to suppress the divine body, everyone in the divine world was talking about this matter. However, the ancient powers that they were talking about didn't make any move. They were active for a while and then became quiet again. It was as if they weren't interested in the divine physique at all. This made the world a bit speechless. When the divine physique appeared in the world, all the sects jumped out and declared that they wanted to take it back. Why were they silent now? So Yusin is the spirit receiving divine physique. No, he should be called Little Nuashing now. I didn't expect him to be a boy. I didn't see through him at first. In the main hall of the Golden Divine Palace, a beautiful woman in green shook her head helplessly. It should be said that we saw wrongly at first, so we forced him to turn into a girl. So that's why he walked so awkwardly. Jin Jinwang bitterly smiled and looked at the portrait on the table. It was the portrait of the spirit receiving divine physique that caused a lot of commotion. Countless people saw it that day. This time, it wasn't just a blurry back view. What's more ridiculous is that, when we were in Yuyan City, he used his real body to join hands with us, but we didn't recognize him. No wonder Yao Hua and the other 9 little guys always said that Yusin agreed to help them, but we didn't see him. So Yusin is Yun Nuashing, and Yun Nuashing is Yusin. Jin Jinwang bitterly smiled and covered his face with a tired heart. Now that I think about it, I think Xin Yishi also knew about it but didn't tell us. I was wondering why that guy was suddenly interested in a little girl that he had never met before. There were so many loopholes. Should I dig my eyes out? Fire God King also bitterly smiled. This brat is really good. He switched between 2 identities at will without revealing any loopholes. Moreover, the 2 identities have different ways of speaking. He really played the roles of Yun Nuashing and Yusin perfectly. It's reasonable that they didn't discover it. Ahem, let's talk about the past when we have time. Thunder God King shrugged as he knocked on the portrait on the table and said seriously, "What do you plan to do? Or should I say, what do the 9 immortal palaces plan to do? It depends on the opinion of the palace masters. Their decisions represent the will of the 9 immortal palaces." Jin Jinwang shook his head. If it's only Yusin Ba, I'm used to this name. If it's only the identity of that person's child, it might not be shaken. However, Xiao Nuashing is the spirit receiving divine physique. This name is too troublesome, especially in this situation. Even the 9 palace masters can't make up their minds. Light God King is also here? Thunder God King was a little surprised as he looked at the 9 people sitting together in a circle in the distance. After all, he might be that person's child. When it comes to important decisions, he will also come. Jin Jinwang nodded. What if they also want to make a move on Xiao Nuashing? Mei Mao was a little worried as she looked at the round table conference. It shouldn't be. The portrait of Little Star has already been circulated in the 9 immortal palaces before his physique was exposed. I think that the palace masters are not looking for him because of the spirit receiving divine physique. They are probably discussing the future strategy. Now that the spirit receiving divine physique has been exposed, Xiao Nuashing will be targeted by countless people. Among them, there will definitely be many old guys at the level of gods. If they directly declare that they want to protect Xiao Nuashing, it's hard to say whether more than 10 ancient forces will attack the 9 immortal palaces together. Jin Jinwang hesitated for a moment before shaking his head. Attack the 9 immortal palaces? That bunch of trash? Our 9 immortal palaces are not even afraid of the 8 ancient families. What's the point of a few mobs? Hearing this, Thunder God King snorted coldly. The 9 immortal palaces had not only relied on their reputation to survive from the ancient times until now. That's what you say, but there are tens of millions of forces in the divine world. How many can our 9 immortal palaces resist? Jin Jinwang sighed. It was always difficult for 2 hands to fight against 4 fists. There were not many people who could be a match for the 9 immortal palaces. However, when a group of first-rate forces gathered together, they could also pose a threat to the 9 immortal palaces. After all, there would be losses if they fought against each other. At that time, if the 8 ancient families intervened again, the 9 immortal palaces would be in imminent danger. Thunder God King also sighed, but his eyes were still resolute. Nothing must happen to that person's child. He is the highest level of protection in the 9 immortal palaces. His protection level is even higher than the palace masters and the others. This is what they said back then. Yes, if something happens to little Nuoxing, we have to force our way in. Jin Jinwang nodded. While they were discussing, the door of the palace slowly opened. 9 figures walked in slowly. They were the 9 immortal palaces elites that Yun Nuoxing had called radish, green vegetables, and chicken stew. More than a year had passed, but they were still as inseparable as before. The energy in their bodies had also become more majestic. They had an ethereal temperament. They had all advanced to the immortal rank. Teacher. Jin Ing slowly stepped forward and respectfully greeted the Gold God King. Why are you all here? Jin Jinwang turned his head in surprise. He looked at the 9 people and said, The 9 immortal palaces have passed? Why are you all only at the 3rd level of the immortal rank? You haven't finished refining the power of the inheritance, right? You're like a sieve that keeps leaking air. Back then, the goal you set for the next 10 years seemed to be the half-demon rank. Shouldn't you add more fuel to the fire? The beautiful woman was a little surprised when she felt the surging energy in the 9 people's bodies. Alright, we've passed the 9 immortal palaces. It's about time to go to the land of the fallen immortals. Jin Jinwang nodded without hesitation. No. Let's go somewhere else. The 9 people's faces turned pale. They wailed and almost fell to their knees. Oh, right, I was wondering if I should send you all to Nuxing, Jin Jinwang joked. Yusin? I didn't expect him to be a boy. Mu Ling's expression was a little strange when she heard this. Now that Yun Nuoxing's news had spread all over the world, they naturally knew as well. The moment they understood the situation, their expressions were very interesting. Greetings, cross-dresser. Yao Hua picked up Yusin's portrait and said seriously. I think boss is to blame for this. Huiji couldn't help but roll his eyes at Yao Hua when he thought of the incident at the pub. Yao Hua laughed dryly. This matter had been instilled into his mind by a few people, and he also understood why Yun Nua planet was so hostile towards him. Not long after, the 9 people in the other hall came out. They were also dressed in colorful clothes. What was surprising was that such a serious meeting didn't last long. The 9 people who came to the door of the hall looked at each other and nodded. Their bodies shook and disappeared on the spot. Only a middle-aged man in a golden robe was left. Jin Jinwang and the others saw this and quickly surrounded him. Temple Master, how was it? Palace Master Jin glanced at them and smiled faintly. With a tremble of his body, he disappeared on the spot, leaving behind only a sentence that hovered in the air. No objections. Protect Yun Nuoxing and help him achieve great success at all costs. Phew! Hearing this, everyone breathed a sigh of relief. They were really afraid that they would fight with Yun Nuoxing. If they met on the battlefield, dozens of pairs of eyes would look at each other. That scene, how embarrassing! Ow, ow, ow! Even if this world is going to be destroyed, we have to keep our promise and stand in front of Yun Nuoxing. Thunder God King suddenly roared heroically, scaring Yao Hua and the others. Well, that's how it is. You guys should advance to Half-Devil as soon as possible and see if you can help. Although that kid has a divine weapon in hand, he doesn't need anyone's help at all. Jin Jinwang shrugged and said. Hearing this, the 9 elites laughed dryly. If they went over and fought with the opponent, it would be Suicide, Taiyuan region, Red Star Academy in the Snow White Palace. 5 people sat on the chairs in the hall, looking a little sloppy. One of them swung his long ponytail. Chuan Yun threw a stack of documents on the table and laughed helplessly. TSK, Little Star's matter has blown up. Hearing this, Yen Xian also sighed. They already knew about the spiritual godly body. To be specific, it was Xian Yin who told them. However, they didn't expect that it would be exposed to the world so soon. There would be countless troubles in the future. Little Star's situation is a little dangerous. The spiritual godly body has attracted countless storms. Should we inform Xianyin? No need. She loves her brother the most. The spiritual imprint is probably able to observe his condition at all times. She should know immediately. However, she can't say anything. They have very important things to do now. So, we should pay attention to this matter. Chuan Yun shook her head, her long ponytail swinging back and forth. But it's about time to go back. We might have to leave for a while. Chuan Yun smiled faintly. Thinking that this era had come to this time, Yen Xin and the other three shook their heads helplessly. Then let's go. The things here have been arranged. It's time to go back. We can take care of little Star over there. Yen Xin sighed and smiled. Okay, let's go. Chuan Yun nodded. The moment she finished speaking, the five of them disappeared from where they were. At the same time, the core figure of Feng Yun, Yun Nuoxing, was currently lying in the Yuan family's palace in Divine Sky City. She had been lying in bed for half a month. In the realm of the gods, where undercurrents were surging, this place was slightly quieter. However, even though it was quiet, the palace's barrier had been opened. As the saying goes, the more dangerous a place is, the safer it is. Even if someone wanted to find her, no one could see this hidden palace. Little boy has been sleeping for half a month. Is he all right? In the small garden behind the palace, Yuan Qian was walking around in the courtyard. Mei Mao looked at the bedroom beside her. There were a few times when she wanted to enter, but she stopped herself and stomped her feet in frustration. Xian and Little Ming are guarding inside. Sister, don't be anxious. It's useless to be anxious. Calm down. Yuan Shi saw that she was walking around a few hundred times and felt a little dizzy. He couldn't help but shake his head and persuade her. Calm down. Yuan Qian was inexplicably angered. She raised her eyebrows and said angrily, The entire world is looking for little boy, but he's still sleeping in there. Our palace can only hold them off for a while. If any god finds him and we can't hold them off, little boy will be dead. How do you expect me to calm down? I know, but it's useless to be angry at me. Sister, if you have the strength to shout, why don't you think of a way to not be found? Yuan Shi felt wronged when he was suddenly shouted at. He even shrunk his neck and muttered softly. After being choked, Yuan Qian scratched her head in frustration and sat down dejectedly. Sister, you can't have really fallen for Nuoxing, right? Yuan Shi hesitated and asked strangely. Although he had guessed with his siblings before, he didn't know the answer. Hearing this, Yuan Qian's pretty face blushed slightly, but she quickly hid it. She rolled her eyes and said angrily, What? Do you have a problem with that? No. Yuan Shi laughed dryly and quickly shook his head. Creak, as soon as Yuan Shi finished speaking, the tightly shut door suddenly opened and a girl in purple walked out slowly. She couldn't help but be startled when she saw the two people sitting in the courtyard. How's little boy? Yuan Qian asked hurriedly as she rushed over to Xian's sudden appearance. Xian couldn't help but shake her head when she heard this. She had been in there for half a month, and now that she came out, her pretty face looked haggard and her soft hair was a little messy. She looked a little haggard, but her celestial beauty didn't diminish in the slightest. Xingxing's injuries have healed, but he hasn't woken up. I think he wants to break through again, Xian said tiredly. Although at their cultivation level, they could ignore a lot of fatigue, this time it was the heart that was tired. It was difficult for them to recover. Yun Nuoxing had been stuck at the first level of the immortal rank for a while now. This time, he had hovered on the line between life and death several times in the superclass battle, which had brought him great benefit. It was only a matter of time before he rose again. Chapter 296. In the room filled with incense, a thick fog of energy filled the entire room, blocking one's vision. When one gently brushed his hand across it, there was the sound of water being stirred. On the soft bed, the fog of energy fluctuated with Yun Nuoxing's breathing. The fog churned and slowly entered his body. On the surface of his body, a thin layer of fluorescent light surged. It was less than an inch thick, but it had an unusually mysterious and vast aura. It was sometimes bright and sometimes dark. This mysterious energy was the power of the stars that Yun Nuoshing had stored at night in Divine Sky City. It had always been hidden in the depths of Yun Nuoshing's body. This time, because of the exhaustion of divine qi, it had been activated. It covered every corner of his body and shone with light, as if it had been cast by the stars. It looked very beautiful. The power of the stars was the purest form of energy in the entire Great Yuan realm, second only to divine power. It gathered in Yun Nuoshing's abdomen, and it was as vast as the universe. Although his strength did not increase, the energy had a qualitative leap. It replaced the originally ethereal immortal qi and turned into the power of the stars. Beside Yun Nuoshing's pillow, the Netherworld Ruins sword shone with a faint light. Strands of soul power passed through the void and entered his mind, repairing his damaged soul. Actually, his injuries had healed long ago. His gorgeous light purple hair had also returned. However, the most important injury this time was caused by the backlash of the Linghong sword. It originated from his soul. If not for the Netherworld Ruins sword's repair, he probably would not have woken up without half a year of rest. Surprisingly, there was a petite figure resting quietly in Yun Nuoshing's arms. At first, Xian wanted to carry her out, but Ming's words made her give up the idea. Brother will feel lonely without anyone to accompany him. When Xian heard this, she was stunned for a long time. Then, she decided to stay as well. In the spiritual world, warm purple flames churned. Yun Nuoshing slowly opened his eyes. Seeing an exquisite oval face looking down at him with interest, he could not help but be stunned. Knee pillow. Feeling the soft touch from the back of his head, Yun Nuoshing immediately understood what was going on. His face turned slightly red, but he didn't have much of a reaction. Anyway, this girl was the one who moved him over, so he should just treat it as an enjoyment. If you can still blush, it means that your brain is fine. Looks like you've recovered. Seeing him blush, Ziyi poked his cheek in amusement and said with a smile, "You should be glad that you have such a good divine weapon by your side. If it weren't for the Nethervoid sword constantly healing your soul, you wouldn't have woken up in half a year." Is it that serious? Hearing this, Yun Nuoshing could not help but laugh dryly. What do you think? If the damage caused by the great Linghong sword could be healed so easily, it would not be called a divine weapon. Luckily, you did not overuse it. If it backfired, hee. Zai rolled her eyes at him and said seriously, "You did not have to make yourself so miserable. I told you that you did not know how to use the great Linghong sword. You just had to force yourself to use it a third time. Now you're suffering, right?" As she spoke, she poked his face with her slender finger, making him feel a little helpless. "You won't teach me. How can I know?" Yun Nuoshing could not help but complain softly. Okay. I'll teach you." Zai was a little helpless at his half-complaining, half-coquettish behavior. She rolled her eyes at him. "Do you still remember the last time you used the Netherworld Ruins sword and this time?" Hearing this, Yun Nuoshing blinked and recalled. It had been a long time since he used the Netherworld Ruins sword. At that time, he was still in the ghastly forest. He remembered that he was dealing with an immortal-level gorilla. He was sent flying with a single strike. But this time, he cut off one of the Emperor of the Underworld's hand. You remember now? Do you know why there is such a big difference? Zai asked again when she saw his eyebrows twitching. You absorbed the soul of the divine weapon? Yun Nuoshing guessed after thinking for a while. No. Zai sighed helplessly and said, although there is a little connection, the biggest connection is not here. Instead, there is a direct connection between you and the Netherworld Ruins sword. Or rather, there is a direct connection between the spiritual divine body and the Netherworld Ruins sword. Connection? Yun Nuoshing did not understand. Yes. Divine weapons are different from other divine weapons. Even if you have it in your hands, You cannot unleash its full power without special means. Connecting them is the best way. Only when there is a connection between them can the full power of the divine weapon be unleashed. So, the change in the power of the Netherworld Ruins sword is the result of me connecting them. Yun Nuoshing was enlightened. But after thinking for a second, she said, "But, I also connected the Linghong sword, so its power should be maximized, right?" "Who told you that this kind of connection is maximized?" Zai rolled her eyes and patted him, saying, "Only when there is a connection at the deepest level, the soul connection, can the full power of the divine weapon be unleashed. How much can it be improved?" Hearing this, Yun Nuoshing asked a little impatiently. He did not know how big the storm in the outside world was, but even if he thought with his stomach, he knew that it would not be small. It might be the biggest storm in 1,000 or 10,000 years. He urgently needed a way to protect himself, and the two divine weapons were the best choice. Although the swirling zither was more powerful, it could only be used 3 times. Unless it was absolutely necessary, he could not use it. How would I know? I have seen a divine weapon, and I have never seen anyone else holding a divine weapon other than you. Zai could not help but pour cold water on Yi Futian when he saw the stars in his eyes. Yun Nuoshing laughed embarrassedly and scratched his head, saying, "Both divine weapons can be connected to each other through the soul connection, right? How can it be that easy?" Zai laughed bitterly and said, "Divine weapons are the kings of kings among weapons. They belong to the category of high and mighty gods among humans. Do you think you can connect to each other through the soul connection just because you want to? If you want to connect to a divine weapon, you can't force it. It will shatter your soul. First of all, you have to gain the approval of the divine weapon. You have already fulfilled this condition. Both the Nethervoid sword and Linghong sword have entered your body, so it shouldn't be a problem for you to connect to them further. Secondly, the power of the soul is also very important. If it's not strong enough, the connection will probably collapse as soon as it starts," Zai explained softly. "Is my power of the soul strong enough?" Yun Nuoshing scratched his head. He was still unclear about some aspects of himself. "I suspect that there is another soul in this body." Hearing his belated question, Zai was so angry that he laughed and gave him a knock on the head. This strange statement stunned him. After a long while, he reacted and rolled his eyes, saying, "I don't have schizophrenia. It's normal that you don't know. I don't specialize in the cultivation of the soul." "Normal my ass." Zai pouted and let out a long sigh, saying, "Little star, should I say that you're ignorant, or should I say that you're naive? How can a person not know how much power he has? If there's an emergency one day and you don't know the upper limit of your power, you'll be in trouble, you know?" After saying that, she saw that he was still looking at her with a curious and cute expression. She knew that he definitely didn't understand. "Forget it, I can't be bothered with you. We'll talk about it when there's an emergency one day." "Hey!" Yun Nuoshing was confused. "It's nothing." Zai patted him weakly and turned her head to the side sulkily. She closed her eyes and didn't care about anything else. "That, Zai." Seeing that she was sulking, Yun Nuoshing was confused. He reached out and gently tugged at her sleeve. With his simple-minded nature, he naturally didn't know what she was angry about. That soul link, how do we do it?" Seeing that she ignored him, Yun Nuoshing was a little embarrassed and hurriedly changed the topic. Silence. A deathly silence. In this soul world filled with purple flames, only the faint sound of the flames could be heard. The two of them didn't speak. Yun Nuoshing felt a little strange, but he was embarrassed to continue lying on her lap. When he wanted to get up, he realized that a small, fair hand was pressing on his shoulder and he couldn't move. "Well, I was wrong, okay?" Yun Nuoshing curled his lips and muttered in a low voice. This kind of silent atmosphere made him feel very awkward. He couldn't move and he couldn't speak. "About the soul link, you should go find Su Ming and the others. I don't know either." Finally, Zai sighed and said indifferently. This made him heave a sigh of relief. He was really afraid that she would suddenly ignore him. As soon as she finished speaking, before Yun Nuoxing could reply, his vision suddenly shook. When he opened his eyes again, he saw a mist swirling around him. When he breathed it in, he could feel a little moist. A vigorous energy flowed into his body, and his strength seemed to have increased a lot. This is the power of the stars? Seeing the thin layer of flickering energy on his body, Yun Nuoxing was slightly stunned. He realized that the energy circulating in his body had been completely replaced at some point in time. The multicolored bead in his lower abdomen had also turned black, flickering with the light of the stars. It was as colorful as the starry sky. What vigorous energy! He clenched his fists and smiled in satisfaction. Zai blocked me. When he felt that the ball of flames was ignoring him, he didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He really didn't understand how he had offended her. Little star, if you keep worrying about someone, but that person doesn't care about anything, what would you think? At this moment, the Su Ming sword beside the bed suddenly said softly. She had heard the conversation just now, so it was time to educate him. I would probably be unhappy, Yun Nuoxing thought and said. Then do you understand Zai's feelings? Hearing his answer, Su Ming smiled silently. Yun Nuoxing was stunned. After thinking for a moment, he suddenly came to a realization. Then, he smiled bitterly and nodded in confusion. It's my fault. Next time, apologize properly. It's good that you understand. So, even if you really don't care about anything, at least don't show it in front of the people around you. Su Ming knocked him and said, All right, let's not talk so much. Hurry up and call Ling Hong out. Let's establish the soul link. Yun Nuoxing nodded and raised his hand to take out the Ling Hong sword. Majestic spatial power spread out like water ripples, causing the space to tremble. How do we establish the link? Yun Nuoxing asked after carefully placing the Ling Hong sword beside the Su Ming sword. Just reveal your soul. As for the rest, Ling Hong will take care of it himself. As soon as he finished speaking, a ball of soul light floated out from between Yun Nuoxing's brows and turned into a human shape. It sat cross-legged in front of Yun Nuoxing. He opened his eyes and couldn't help but raise his eyebrows. He saw a beautiful purple-black pattern on the right arm of the soul-cast human figure. It was very beautiful. First impressions are the strongest. Seeing his surprise, Su Ming suddenly smiled proudly. He had established the soul link with Yun Nuoxing long ago. It was just that he didn't know. If it wasn't for the soul link, he wouldn't have been able to cut Chi Yu so happily. Yun Nuoxing smiled bitterly. At this moment, he saw a few silver-blue threads floating out from Ling Hong's sword, directly wrapping around his soul. At the position of his left arm, they slowly weaved an exquisite pattern. Buzz! When the pattern was just formed, he suddenly felt a strange energy circulating in his soul. Although there was no change, he instinctively felt that the energy he could use had increased. At the same time, a mass of information spread in his mind, allowing him to understand many things. Regarding the other uses of Ling Hong's sword, what made him most excited was that the number of times he could use it had increased. 10 times. Chapter 297. An extra 7 uses? Shouldn't it be unlimited? After the pleasant surprise, Yun Nuoxing was stunned. He didn't understand why there was a limit to the number of uses. Be content. Not to mention that Ling Hong has a flaw now. Even if he didn't have a flaw, he can only use it 10 times. After using it, he still has to recuperate. However, every time he uses it, his power will increase. Of course, it will consume more energy as well. The Netherworld Ruins sword tapped him with its hilt. Also, regarding our advancement, you don't have to work too hard. When the time comes, you will naturally advance. Right now we still have to wait for the right time, the Netherworld Ruins sword said. She was really afraid that Yun Nuoxing would act recklessly and explode them. Since you said so, I naturally won't act recklessly. Hearing this, Yun Nuoxing stuck out his tongue. At first, he really did have such thoughts. However, after being warned when they first met, he dismissed the idea. Shaking his head helplessly, Yun Nuoxing looked down and saw that Ming was also here. Seeing her sleeping face, he couldn't help but smile. He dotingly patted her head and held her in his arms. He put away the Netherworld Ruin's sword and slowly walked to the door. He slept for another half a month. Many people should be worried. Creak. The bright and beautiful sunlight poured down from the sky, causing him to close his eyes. After he got used to it, he slowly opened his eyes. When he saw Ziyan and Yuan Qian rushing over impatiently, he couldn't help but chuckle and walk over. Xingxing, are you okay? Are your injuries healed? Are there any sequelae? As soon as he walked over, before he could say anything, Ziyan threw out one question after another. Her worried expression warmed his heart. Little boy, are you okay? It was rare for Yuan Qian to not carry Yun Nuoxing and spin him around. She only held his hand and asked with concern. Yun Nuoxing smiled and shook his head. I'm fine. I've troubled you all this time. Hey Nuoxing, you're finally awake. During this period of time, Big Sister has been talking about you by my ear for at least 1,000 times. She hasn't even slept. Yuan Shi let out a sigh of relief when he saw how refreshed he was. He patted him on the shoulder, but as soon as he finished speaking, he was glared at by Yuan Qian. I'm not exaggerating, Yuan Qian muttered unhappily. Then, under the astonished gazes of the others, she pulled Yuan Shi and flew towards the palace. Before she left, she smiled and said, You guys take your time chatting. I'll go take a look at the situation outside. During this period of time, the palace has been spied on by many people. After he finished speaking, he instantly disappeared from their sight, leaving them staring at each other, unable to understand what was going on. Thank you for your hard work during this period. Looking at Ziyan's haggard face, Yun Nuoxing couldn't help but sigh. She smoothed her long, silky hair and said softly. He had heard from Su Ming that she had stayed by his side while he was asleep. It was Su Ming who had persuaded her to leave just now. You've become like a girl. Ziyan's face reddened slightly. Mei Mao looked at him quietly and couldn't help but chuckle. He patted her head. I'm not coming anymore. Even you are making fun of me. I can't live like this. Yun Nuoxing patted her head lightly. He felt that there was nothing left to live for. He called everyone he met a girl. That was enough. Now even Ziyan was making fun of him. It's nothing. I think it's quite pretty. It's even more pleasing to the eye than mine. Ziyan laughed and stuck out her tongue cutely. He felt helpless. It's not as pretty as yours, Yun Nuoxing muttered in an almost imperceptible voice. He even glanced at that fairy-like face. I heard from Ming that you have a girl's name? What's it? Ziyan couldn't help but ask as her beautiful eyes carefully sized up this peerlessly beautiful face that could outshine the moon and put the flowers to shame. A slap landed on Yun Nuoxing's face. He felt that he could die now. Why did this girl say everything? Seriously, Yusin. In the end, he said weakly. It's a very nice name. Ziyan smiled sweetly. Thank you. Yun Nuoxing laughed dryly and turned his head away, a little embarrassed. He strolled through the sea of flowers with Ziyan and slowly talked about the events of the past half a month. It wasn't much different from what Yun Nuoxing thought. The birth of the spiritual godly physique had really caused a huge storm in the realm of the god. It could be said that it was the most important thing in the entire era. This surprised him a little. He didn't think that there would be so many people coveting his physique. The sea of flowers swayed with the wind, giving off a pleasant fragrance. Perhaps it was because she was reminded of the scenery, but when she saw this colorful sea of flowers, Ziyan suddenly thought of the sea of flowers that her father had planted for her in the Xian family. Although it wasn't like here, where there were flowers everywhere, that sea of flowers had a special meaning to her. Homesick? Seeing her lonely expression, Yun Nuoshing smiled and stroked her hair with familiarity. He even patted her head. I'm thinking of the sea of flowers that Daddy planted. Taking a deep breath, Xian sighed. She was used to being patted on the head, so she didn't feel any repulsion. Yun Nuoshing thought for a while, then looked up at the sky and sighed. He clenched his teeth and nodded. Xian, how about I send you back to Xingyu City first? Hearing this voice, her delicate body suddenly trembled. Xian looked at Yun Nuoshing in confusion. Mei Mao's eyes flashed with panic. She hurriedly said, Did I cause you trouble? Yun Nuoshing smiled bitterly and shook his head. I caused you trouble. No, more accurately speaking, if you continue to follow me, it will bring you a lot of trouble. I can vaguely guess why you want to follow me, but I can't be sure. Actually, you don't have to do this. Right now, I'm being chased by the Qi family, and I'm being watched by many people. Even if I have 2 divine weapons to protect me, I might not be able to turn misfortunes into blessings every time. If one day you get injured, how can I live with a clear conscience? Yun Nuoshing said gently as he patted her head. Hearing this, Xian's expression became a little gloomy. She wasn't like Ziyi, who could help him. He had always been the one helping her. Thinking of this, she sighed and smiled helplessly. I'll do as you say. I was brought out by you, Xingxing. I'll do whatever you say. She had a special sense of obedience towards Yun Nuoshing. She was like a younger sister who listened to her older brother's arrangements. She had never objected. When Yun Nuoshing heard this, he was a little stunned. Why does it feel like I'm abandoning her? That doesn't make sense. I don't mean to disdain you. It's just that there's too much trouble right now, and I can't take care of you. You like to travel. When I have the power to intimidate the world, the 2 of us can slowly travel. I'll definitely help you restore the 5 elements body. Yun Nuoshing shook her head gently and smiled bitterly. His voice was very gentle, so gentle that it could squeeze water out of it. Okay. Xian nodded and didn't say anything. Brother, you're not allowed to abandon Sister Xian. Just as Yun Nuoshing heaved a sigh of relief, Ming, who was supposed to be asleep in his arms, suddenly protested. Both of them were stunned. Then, they hurriedly took a step back and lowered their heads to look at Ming. They saw that she was staring at him with her bright eyes and pouted as if she was sulking. What? I really didn't think that way. Yun Nuoshing was so anxious that she almost cried. Didn't this little girl dislike Xian in the beginning? Why was she on her side now? Then why did you send Sister Xian back? Ming shook her head unwillingly and pinched Yun Nuoshing's face with her small hands. She couldn't help but kick him twice with her legs, as if she was acting coquettishly. Ming was about 10 years old now. She was full of life, and her long purplish-black hair fell to her calves. She was only 3 heads shorter than Yun Nuoshing's current height, but she had always been curled up in his arms like a little bird. Now that she was throwing a tantrum, it was really difficult for him to hold her tightly. He was afraid that he wouldn't be able to hold her firmly and would drop her. Hey, my cutest little Ming, stop moving around. Your brother can't take it. The little girl in his arms kept struggling, making it very difficult for him. He immediately mimicked Yuan Qian's tone and smiled bitterly. Then, brother, you have to promise me that you won't abandon Sister Xian. Otherwise, I'll go with Sister. Ming shook her little head like a rattle drum. She hugged Yun Nuoshing's neck and rubbed her head hard against it. That's a good idea. Yun Nuoshing was stunned when she heard this. She suddenly patted her, but as if she had thought of something. Xian and Ming were both stunned when they heard him shout excitedly. They didn't know what was wrong with him. How about this, Xian? I'll send you back to Xingyu City. You can help me take care of Ming while you're at it. Yun Nuoshing smiled as she patted Ming's back. She felt that this was a win-win situation. It was absolutely safe for her to travel alone. The 2 girls were stunned when they heard this. Ming's eyes widened in disbelief. She suddenly leaned on Yun Nuoxing's shoulder and cried out, "Woo woo, brother, don't abandon me, woo woo, I really didn't abandon you. This is an emergency, Yun Nuoxing was so anxious that she was about to cry. Why did she make it sound like she was a heartless person? Weren't they discussing the best way to deal with this? Woo woo, brother doesn't want me anymore, woo woo. Ming cried so hard that the two girls couldn't bear to see her cry. Yun Nuoxing felt a chill on her shoulder. She cried so hard that her heart softened. Yun Nuoxing couldn't bear to see her cry so pitifully. However, she didn't want her to be in danger. At this moment, Su Ming suddenly whispered, "Little star, let Su Ming stay. This child is a little special. Perhaps he can be of some help. Also, bring that little girl of the 5 elements with you." Yun Nuoxing was stunned. She remembered that Ming had once sensed Ling Hong's location. She suddenly hesitated. She wanted to collect the items on the ranking. Ming could sense some spiritual items. She might be able to save some trouble if she brought him along. No, but what if something happens to me? Ming, what will they do? Yun Nuoxing shook her head and rejected the idea. What can happen? Ling Hong and I are here. Even a rebirth realm expert won't be able to divine where you are. Plus, you have the swirling zither and the God's mark. What are you afraid of? Su Ming smiled. Yun Nuoxing's resolute heart wavered. After being persuaded twice, Yun Nuoxing was a little hesitant. After thinking for a long time, he felt that it made sense. He sighed and patted Ming Ming's head with his palm. He smiled gently and said, "Ming Ming, be good. Big brother won't send you back, okay?" Really? Ming was slightly happy to hear this. She raised her teary eyes and looked at him suspiciously. She kept sniffling as if she was afraid that he was lying. Really? When has brother ever lied to you? Seeing her crying like a little kitten, Yun Nuoxing couldn't help laughing. He kissed her gently on the forehead, wiped the tears on her little face with his sleeve, and said with a smile, "Pinky promise. Brother, you can't lie." Little Ming seemed to be a little worried. She reached out her pinky and hooked it with Yun Nuoxing's pinky. "Pinky promise. Hang yourself. You can't change it for the rest of your life." Yun Nuoxing watched her dotingly as she finished the ritual. The two pinky poked each other with their different-sized thumbs, as if they were verifying something. Chapter 298. Do you feel better now? Yun Nuoxing chuckled as he scratched Ming's little nose. She had purposely changed 100 years to a lifetime. Did that mean that she wanted him to take care of her for the rest of her life? Yes. We've agreed that Big Brother will be with us for the rest of his life. Ming nodded her little head firmly and acted coquettishly on his shoulder. Xian couldn't help but smile as she watched the two of them from the side. Then, I'll have to trouble you even more from now on. Yun Nuoxing sighed softly and smiled at Xian. Even though he felt a little helpless, he wasn't afraid since he had chosen this path. No matter how great the waves and thorns were in front of him, all he had to do was slash them open with his sword. From now on, we'll share weal and woe together. Xian chuckled sweetly when she heard this. She gently held the hand that was stretched out to her, and suddenly stuck out her little tongue. "Is that what you said?" Yun Nuoxing smiled bitterly. He had to compromise in the end. He thought helplessly for a moment. In the hall of the palace, Yuan Qian stared at the image reflected by the crystal on the wall in the middle. Even though the outside of the Yuan family's palace was empty, she could feel dozens of detection waves sweeping back and forth through the crystal. They were constantly sensing this seemingly empty space. Troublesome, so troublesome, so troublesome. Yuan Qian sighed helplessly after sensing carefully for a while. She put the crystal away and couldn't help but punch the wall with her delicate fist. "Sister, what's wrong?" Yuan Shi squinted his large eyes. He felt a little heartache as he hurriedly took her little hand and blew on it. "Our hiding place has been spied on. There are too many people in the outside world who are paying attention to this place. I reckon that we won't be able to hide for much longer." Yuan Qian sighed. She felt a headache coming on. Is the Yuan family no longer able to intimidate them? Yuan Shi was stunned when he heard this. His eyes turned cold. The Yuan family's position was unshakable. He didn't expect that someone would target them. They clearly knew that they wanted to protect Yun Nuoxing, but they weren't afraid at all. Yun Nuoxing is too attractive. The little boy is the most mysterious divine physique of spiritual reception. I searched through dozens of cabinets in the Yuan family's library and only found a book about this physique. Moreover, there wasn't much information about it. The divine physique of reception was born and it was created by the heavens. Can devour all the energy in the world. Only one divine physique can be born in the world. And there are only 8 divine physiques in the entire De Yuan realm. The little boy should be of divine physiques. Divine physiques. Physiques. Now, the storm of the spiritual godly body had spread to the entire god realm. The Yuan family's deterrence was no longer enough. Moreover, this was only their own decision to protect the Yun Nua planet. If her father and the elders in the family were also interested in the spiritual godly body, what should they do? Would they really turn against each other? She couldn't do anything to Yun Nuoxing. She couldn't even kill her. Sister, don't worry. If you like it, father will like it too. He won't object. That kind of situation won't happen. Yuan Shi knew what she was thinking when he saw her deep in thought. He patted her shoulder and smiled. However, he sighed heavily in his heart. If they really stood on the opposite side, they might be stubborn and stand on Yun Nuoxing's side. Although he said that, he imagined that if they stood on the opposite side of Yun Nuoxing, they would probably be killed by his sword. I hope so. It's fine with father. He probably won't say anything. I'm just worried that the elders will. Yuan Qian sighed and couldn't continue. The air suddenly froze. Both of them lowered their heads and didn't know what to do. Yuan Shao returned to the Yuan family after receiving Yun Nuoxing. He went to discuss the matter of Yun Nuoxing with the family head. Half a month had passed, so there should be a reply by now. Yuan Qian clenched her jade-like hands tightly as she looked at the fiery red crystal mirror on the wall. This crystal mirror was used to contact her father. Although all 10 of them ran away in the past 2 years, they would occasionally contact each other through this crystal mirror. Therefore, they didn't lose contact with each other. Usually, she would be excited when the crystal suddenly lit up. However, she was now a little afraid that the crystal would light up in the next moment and bring her news that would make her despair. She also hoped that when the mirror lit up, her father's affectionate face would give her a warm smile. The contradiction between the two sides made her very agitated. Qian. A few minutes later, Yun Nuoxing and the other 2, who had adjusted themselves, came to the hall. We have to continue our journey. Surprisingly, Yuan Qian didn't urge them to stay. Instead, she urged them to leave quickly. She urged them to leave as she pushed them out, as if she was chasing them away. The few of them were a little baffled and looked at her strangely. Didn't she want them to stay and not leave some time ago? It's not safe here anymore. Dozens of probes were sweeping around outside the hidden space just now. I'm afraid that someone won't be able to hold back. The Yuan family's deterrence power can no longer deter those people. Yuan Qian sighed and said. Almost everyone in the world was ready to make a move. She knew that Yun Nuoxing had the light element, so perhaps no one would be able to catch him. However, if he continued to stay here, he might be in danger. In the absence of Yuan Shao, the defense was relatively weak. Yun Nuoxing also knew this, so he didn't stay for long. Just as he was about to leave, he was dragged by Yuan Qian to the other side of the hall. At first, he thought that she wanted to have a private conversation with him, but Xian was also brought along. When they reached the corner of the hall, Yuan Qian pushed the bookcase aside, revealing a passage behind it. Yun Nuoxing and the others were a little surprised. They clearly didn't expect that there would be something like a secret passage here. This is an emergency passage. It hasn't been used for a long time. Yuan Qian clapped her hands and said with a smile when she saw the surprised expressions on their faces. After saying this, she took the lead and entered the passage. Yun Nuoxing and the others hurriedly followed behind. The passage wasn't very wide. It was only enough for 3 people to walk side by side. Some crystals for illumination were hung on both sides. A faint fluorescent light circulated, so it didn't appear dim. The passage wasn't long. In less than 2 minutes, they reached the end and walked into a spacious space. Bright light shone on the bluestone floor. The few of them turned a corner and walked down the stairs. The sound of energy flowing could be heard from below. Yun Nuoxing was a little curious as he walked to the side and looked down. At the bottom of the stairs, Yuan Qi and the others were orderly surrounding a round platform. Colorful energy was churning in their hands, emitting astonishing fluctuations. On the side, Yuan Yi and the others were also doing the same. Traces of energy flowed into the round platform in the center and disappeared in a flash. This is... Yun Nuoxing was stunned for a moment. He was no longer unfamiliar with that round platform. It was actually the base of a teleportation door. However, looking at the dusty appearance, it seemed that it hadn't been used for decades. The whole thing was dim and lightless. He didn't know if it could be used again. This traveler's palace has a teleportation door. You can go anywhere by entering the coordinate. However, it hasn't been used for more than 100 years. Usually, I feel that this place is too dirty, so I don't come here to maintain it. In the end, it broke down. Originally, it was only used for an emergency escape. I never thought that there would be a day when I would use it. In the end, it has to be repaired urgently. Yuan Qian blushed and stuck out her tongue. Hearing this, Yun Nuoxing couldn't help but smile bitterly. They had to use an emergency escape passage just to go out. Was it really that embarrassing? They were like street rats that had to be beaten up by people. They had to hide when they saw people. However, the current situation was indeed similar. Sister, the space runes on this stone platform are almost worn out. We don't understand the power of space, so we can only borrow the power of space from the power of heaven and earth to repair it urgently. This is the best we can do. Seeing Yuan Qian and the others come down, Yuan Qi patted his clothes. His dusty appearance made Yuan Qian laugh. What surprised Yun Nuoxing was that not only were Yuan Qi and his siblings here, but even Jin Heng and Yao Ling were here to help repair this broken teleportation door. The Divine Sky City is a long way from the Tana's Water God Temple. This old machine probably won't be able to send you far. You'll have to depend on yourselves in the future. Yuan Qian nodded, turned to Yun Nuoxing, and said helplessly, "It's enough. Actually, we'll be fine by ourselves." Hearing this, Yun Nuoxing laughed. Although he couldn't use the light element at full power now because he would probably faint the moment he reached the speed of light, he could still use it at half the speed of light and shake off some low-level gods. "I know your light element is powerful now." Yuan Qian rolled her eyes at him. The 10 of them surrounded this stone platform that was more than 10 meters wide. Energy continuously surged into the stone platform. Several colors of light flowed, making it look like it was made of colorful glass. It was very beautiful. A few minutes later, a slight buzzing sound came from the stone platform. Then, the entire stone platform trembled. A silver-blue light faintly seeped out. 3 stone rings slowly rose from the top of the stone platform, pulling up a silver-blue light curtain. Tens of thousands of tiny silver lights hung down, looking very mysterious. "Phew, it's finally repaired." Yuan Qi wiped the sweat on his forehead and let out a long sigh of relief. "I'm so tired. I want to sleep." Yawning, Yuan Yi muttered. Her little face was filled with resentment. It was obvious that she was very unhappy about this. Originally, she did not have much of a good impression of Yun Nuoxing. Now, she had to repair this damn teleportation gate for him, causing the depression in her heart to rise to the peak. "We can only help you to this point. You'll have to walk your own path in the future." Jin Heng let out a sigh of relief. He walked to Yun Nuoshing's side, patted his shoulder, and said with a smile, "If you have any problems, go to the 9 Deities Temple's branch building. The things the Divine King and the others gave you should be able to help you 100% there." Okay. Yun Nuoshing nodded with a smile. He was already very satisfied that everyone was helping him like this. Even if they didn't do anything, he wouldn't say anything. Red and blue light flowed on her pretty face. In just a short moment, that girl's face, which left a deep impression on others, returned to its original appearance. She looked heroic, and her slightly raised smile and raised eyebrows made her look a little arrogant and divine. Seeing this, everyone couldn't help but roll their eyes. This was really a live face change, and there was no time to switch back. "Little boy, we'll send you to this point." Walking up the dust-covered stone platform, Yuan Qian looked at this unforgettable face. She stretched out her jade-like hand and gently stroked it, looking a little lonely. "The wind is bleak and the water is cold. Once a hero leaves, he will never return. Even if you send him off for 1,000 miles, he will have to part in the end. Benefactor, you should go back." Patting her little hand, Yun Nuoshing smiled. In order to lighten the atmosphere, he even joked a little. Hearing this, Yuan Qian smiled bitterly. When it came to parting, she really couldn't bear to part with him. However, there was no other way. He had his own sky to fly in, and she had her own path to walk. After parting, the two of them might not meet again. The realm of the gods was so big, what were the chances of them meeting again? "Nuoshing, I'll miss you." At the last moment, Yuan Qian softly called out his name. She tiptoed and gently kissed the corner of his mouth. Everyone opened their eyes wide when they saw this scene, and then they hurriedly closed their eyes. Their horrifying expressions were extremely amusing. Ziyan blushed slightly as well, and she hurriedly covered Ming Ming's eyes before turning around. Her action made Yun Nuoshing's head explode. He was stunned. Looking at the white figure slowly retreating, he couldn't help but blush. He didn't expect Yuan Qian to make such a bold move. The soft touch at the corner of his mouth seemed to still be there, and it was a little fragrant. Nuoshing, wait. Yuan, she couldn't watch anymore. He patted his clothes and jumped onto the stone platform, standing next to Yun Nuoshing. At the same time, 9 sighs sounded behind him. The latter was a little surprised and didn't know what was going on. "Hee, I'll go with you." Yuan Shi spread his hands and smiled. After thinking about it for a while, he decided to go with him. He even argued with Yuan Qi and the others about it. Seeing this, Yun Nuoshing helplessly shook his head. He looked at Yuan Shi and smiled wickedly. "You have to be prepared to risk your life." Yuan Shi was frightened by this smile. He laughed dryly, but still nodded. Since he stood on the platform, he naturally had to be prepared. "No problem." Standing on the stone platform, Yun Nuoshing took one last look at the few of them. His gaze lingered on Yuan Qian for a while before he nodded at her and smiled. Then, he swept his gaze across the crowd and finally took a deep breath. He turned around and agilely leaped up and slowly floated towards the teleportation gate. "Nuoshing, I love you." Seeing his figure shrink in front of her eyes, Yuan Qian panicked. Her heart ached and she suddenly shouted loudly. Her pretty face was red and her pearly white teeth bit her red lip. Mei Mao's eyes were filled with mist. Seeing this, everyone fell silent. His body trembled violently. After a moment, he chuckled. Yun Nuoshing waved his hand handsomely and turned around. He opened his arms and laughed loudly. As their figures disappeared, he slowly floated on the spot. "It's a small world. Everyone, if fate wills it, we'll meet again in Little Shenzhou." Chapter 299. Thousands of miles away from the Divine Sky City, in the sky far away, a silver-blue space door opened slowly. Rings of light spread out and stabilized the small door. When the space door stabilized completely, Yuan Shi and the others fell out. Then, Yun Nuoshing, who had opened her arms, also floated down slowly. The wind elements surged and carried the few of them. Yun Nuoshing stood in the sky with her hands behind her back. She opened her 6 wide wings and looked in the direction of the divine sky city. There was a tinge of loneliness in her expression, but there was also a tinge of warmth. Xingxing, have you accepted Sister Yuan Qian? Seeing his blissful expression, Xian felt uncomfortable for some reason. She couldn't help but ask in a low voice. Hearing this, Yun Nuoshing regained her senses and shook her head. She smiled and said, "No, I just feel that the feeling of being remembered and loved by someone is quite good. I don't have a family and haven't experienced this feeling many times. The only people I can get close to are my friends." "Brother, you make it sound like no one wants you." Even though the last few sentences were said very softly, Ming Ming still heard it. He immediately glared at him and tugged at his sleeve with his small hand in dissatisfaction. Yun Nuoshing smiled and rubbed Ming's head. She shook her head and said, "Haha, it's just a moment of realization." Xian smiled and held Yun Nuoshing's hand. She said, "Don't worry, you still have us by your side. You won't feel lonely." Looking at the two of them, and then at their intertwined hands, Yuanqi scratched her head and said with a naughty smile, "Should I not have come? I feel like I've become a third wheel." Yun Nuoshing and Xian were stunned. Their faces turned red and they hurriedly let go of their hand. Xian glanced at him and changed the topic. "Will the Yuan family be okay?" "It's okay. Sister will take care of it." Yuanqi smiled and nodded. Looking into the distance, he said, "Tana's water god temple is very far away from Divine Sky City. Even if we used the teleportation portal to travel some distance, we don't know where we are now or how to get there." "Don't worry." Yun Nuoshing waved her hand and took out the treasure map. It expanded in the air until it was 300 meters long and wide. She glanced at it and pointed at a flickering red dot. "We're here." Then, he drew on the map and pointed to a palace in the north that was covered by water. He said, "The Tana's water god's temple is here. We can reach it in a few months." Yuanqi looked at the huge map strangely and was a little surprised. Some maps relied on complicated matrices and the power of space to accurately show one's location. However, the complexity of those matrices was frightening. After all, one had to constantly locate the corresponding area on the map. It was very troublesome to make them. This was the first time he had seen the real thing. His finger moved on the map a few times. When Yun Nuoshing confirmed the direction, she put it away and took out the Netherworld Ruins sword. "Let's go. It's a long journey. Before the little dragon hatches, let's sit on the sword." Yun Nuoshing grinned as she enlarged the Netherworld Ruins sword until it was 30 meters long. She had been sitting on the sun god bow all this time. It was rare for the Netherworld Ruins sword to come back. She had to give it back to her. Hearing this, the Netherworld Ruins sword seemed a little unhappy. It glowed slightly and said, "I rushed back to see you, so you're going to use me as a cushion." Yun Nuoshing was stunned and scratched her head awkwardly. She quickly took out the sun god bow and said, Then I'll change to another one." Just as she was about to put the Nethervoid sword away, she suddenly said something that made everyone panic. "No, I'll do it." The Netherworld Ruins sword glowed as if it didn't want to resist. When everyone heard this, they couldn't help but roll their eyes. "What do you want?" In the end, they all sat on her body. The Netherworld Ruins sword hummed softly and turned into a streak of light, rushing toward the north. A faint barrier of light emanated from the sword, blocking out the fierce wind that was coming at them. Suddenly, Yun Nuoshing thought of something and quickly took out the heavenly halberd. A faint golden light gathered on her finger, and she wiped the halberd lightly. Then, a layer of golden film disappeared and a transparent blue figure appeared. When the figure appeared, she was stunned for a moment. She looked at the scenery around her and then looked down at Yun Nuoshing, who was smiling awkwardly. She couldn't help but put her hands on her hips and complained, "Brother Nuoshing, you finally let Exhilarating out." Sorry." Yun Nuoshing scratched her head. He had indeed sealed Lon Xen in the heavenly halberd because he was worried. However, he didn't expect that this seal would last for more than half a month. During this time, he was unconscious and naturally couldn't let her out. Pulling Lon Xen to sit down, Yun Nuashing patted her head and said, "I heard you mention the Tana's Water Holy Temple. Do you know anything about it?" Lon Xen blinked her watery eyes and stared at him for a while. Then, she said, "Tana's Water God Temple, I do know about it. In my time, the mythological era had already existed. If you want me to say something, unless what?" Yun Nuashing looked into her bright eyes and laughed awkwardly. "Humph." Lon Xen snorted and smiled slyly. She poked Yun Nuashing's nose and said, "Unless Brother Nuashing promises that you won't suppress me anymore. Add one more condition, except for dangerous situations." Yun Nuashing raised his eyebrows and nodded. "No, I might be able to help you then." Lon Xen shook her head unhappily. Hearing this, Yun Nuashing rested his chin on his hand and looked at her in a daze. After a while, he frowned and shook his head, saying, "No, when there's a situation, you should be obedient and stay behind your brother." Brother Nuashing. Lon Xen felt wronged. She blinked and looked at him with a pitiful look, which made him want to protect her even more. Seeing this, Yun Nuashing smiled wickedly. He reached out and pinched her little nose, saying, "Hey, you said that I'll be your brother. Your sister has to listen to you no matter what." The two of them stared at each other without saying a word. The three people at the side also looked at each other because they couldn't understand what they were talking about. They could only stare at each other. After a while, Lon Xen gave in. She nodded helplessly and said, "All right, I'll listen to Brother Nuashing. That's a good girl." Yun Nuashing smiled and patted her head. "If I had known, I would have treated you as my elder sister." Lon Xen pouted and muttered. She ran her hand through her long hair and pondered for a while. Then, she started to speak slowly. "Tana's Water God Temple, in my time, belonged to an ancient country, Rain Country. It was a superpower that worshipped the water element. Compared to our country, it was countless times stronger. Even in the realm of the gods, it was famous, and Tana's Water God Temple was the core inheritance ground of Rain Country. It was a pilgrimage ground for countless people who cultivated the water element. Although it was said to be semi-public, some important places were obviously not accessible. I've heard that there were even gods who did not hesitate to put down their pride and go on a pilgrimage for some things. Rain Country was located in a place that was covered by rain all year round. This was also the origin of their name. The dragon chi rising from the dragon veins covered the whole country as if it was in a fairyland. I also went there once. After I came back, my cultivation improved a lot. However, Rain Country was inexplicably destroyed." Lon Xen sighed. She looked a little regretful, as if she had a good impression of that place. "Destroyed?" Yun Nuashing was startled. "I don't know what caused it. On the day of Rain Country's destruction, it was as if a vast ocean had fallen from the sky, drowning Rain Country in the ocean. Tana's Water God Temple was the first to bear the brunt of the impact and was mostly destroyed. However, if it was only water, it would be impossible for the people of Rain Country not to have any countermeasures. There were people who cultivated the water element inside, and there were also quite a number of gods. If it was only water, how could it drown a country that mainly cultivated water?" Hearing this, Yun Nuashing frowned. After thinking for a while, she said, "You mean, someone did it?" "I don't know." Lon Xen shook her head. She sighed and said, "Some people said that an old emperor of Rain Country had a problem with his cultivation. He went mad and couldn't control his power, so he destroyed Rain Country. Some people also said that some evil demon was sealed under Tana's Water God Temple. It broke out of seclusion and took its anger out on Rain Country that was sealed, so it destroyed Rain Country. I don't remember too much." This happened 4 years before I was sealed away. After that, the rain country no longer existed in the realm of the god. There was only a dilapidated divine palace standing in a place covered by a vast ocean. However, there were still many people coming and going from the original location of the rain country, and there wasn't any great disturbance. Lan Exine furrowed her brows and pondered for a long time before shaking her head. Ha! Yun Nuashing tilted her head. The Tana's water god temple, that she heard in the present world, was only a forbidden area with a bad reputation. She didn't expect that it had such a history in the mythological era long ago. Yun Nuashing also told Xian and the other two about this. They also expressed their surprise. After all, it was so long ago that people in the present world couldn't possibly know about it. About this, I don't know too much. Yuan Shi scratched his eyebrows. After thinking for a long time, he said slowly, "It is said that every year, a shrill roar will be heard from Tana's water god temple. The roar is earth-shattering, and it can be heard clearly from hundreds of millions of miles away. However, every time this day comes, gods from all the major forces will go to the edge of the ocean to take a look. However, they didn't find anything. Moreover, there is nothing on the vast ocean surface. No one knows what is roaring." "That is an ocean?" Yun Nuashing was startled. There was indeed a waterhole drawn on the map. A temple was stuck in the waterhole like an upside-down onion. However, it didn't look like an ocean. Seeing her shocked expression, Yuan Shi was also startled. After thinking for a while, he said, "The ocean in Tana's water god temple is expanding every year, constantly eroding the land. It has expanded several times over the years. Some people estimate that it will exceed 100 million miles in less than 10 years. Yun Nuashing finally understood. The map that Xian Yin gave him was left behind a long time ago. After so many years, it wouldn't be strange if there were any changes. However, this change seemed to be a little too big. Furthermore, after countless years, no life has been born in that sea. In fact, there are no signs of water attribute demonic beasts or monstrous beasts. Due to the fact that there is no life there, that is why it is called a life-forbidden zone. As for the specifics, I have never been there before. Thus I do not know," Yuan Shi said. "Well, you will know when you get there." Chapter 300. The blue sky was like a huge mirror, without a speck of dust. The bright sunlight poured down from the sky, and the two dazzling suns chased each other as they slowly wandered towards the top of the sky. The autumn wind blew gently, bringing with it the smell of the earth and the fresh smell of the grass and trees, adding a bit of vitality to the atmosphere. The chilling autumn was extremely obvious in the northern wilderness. The earth wore a golden sweater, and withered yellow leaves and bright maple leaves floated down. A silver ship quietly pushed the golden maple leaves away from the surface of the water. It floated leisurely in the water and flowed down with the current. On the small ship, there were only 5 people. Among them, a young man in black stood at the bow of the ship, humming a song. In his arms was a little girl of about 10 years old. Listening to him humming, the little girl shook her head. A girl with a slightly transparent body sat at the bow of the ship. She kept shaking her 2 dazzlingly white, round and long legs. She tapped lightly on the water and drew a line in the water. However, she was so cold that she frowned. The people on the ship were naturally Yun Nuashing and the others. At this moment, they were not in a hurry to continue their journey. They sailed the dragon Xian Silver, and floated away with the current. He had changed into a slightly younger face. The so-called life is to be comfortable. Yun Nuashing stretched and yawned lazily. The warm sunlight shone on her body, making her feel lazy. In this kind of weather, it was the best time to sleep. Brother is a lazy bum. Ming saw this and could not help but pinch his nose. He smiled foolishly. This is called enjoyment. It's such a waste not to sleep in such good weather. Yun Nuashing stuck her tongue out and smiled. Behind him, Ziyen, who was sitting cross-legged on a praying mat, pursed her lips and laughed. Her purple clothes were bright and moving, and even the sunlight in the sky lost its splendor for an instant. She rather liked this kind of ordinary life. Being ordinary and indifferent was also a kind of truth. The river was very wide, and it was not a problem for more than 10 ships to sail side by side. It was also very gentle. The autumn wind blew along the lawn by the shore. Coupled with the warm sunlight, it was so comfortable that it made people want to sleep. In the water, fishes jumped up from time to time, splashing water. They swung their tails in the air, and fell back into the water. Yuan Shi, who was squatting by the side of the boat, was staring at the flying fish that were jumping up and down. Suddenly, he reached out his hand like lightning and grabbed a fish that was very close to him. Then, he hung it over the bonfire that was burning brightly. In this row, there were actually 4 or 5 fish that were hanging on the bonfire. Yuan Shi took a deep breath, licked his lips, and shouted at the bow of the ship, "Nuashing, 3 beauties, do you want to eat grilled fish? Let's eat fish." Hearing that there was food, Ming Ming's eyes lit up. He jumped down from Yun Nuashing's arms and jumped over to Yuan Shi. "Little foodie." Yun Nuashing and Xian shook their heads helplessly. Night slowly fell, and darkness slowly pulled the curtains from the other side of the sky. The 2 suns were on a horizontal line and set on the other side of the horizon, forming 2 semicircles. The orange light illuminated the entire sky, as if it was about to burn. Under the water, a long strip of light was reflected. As the egg yolk fell, it was annihilated in the water. Endless starlight descended, crossing an immeasurable distance and landing on the other side of the starry sky. The bright stars decorated the sky, and 2 bright strips of light crossed in the sky. On the other side of the sky, the ball of light was like a huge sun, tearing apart the darkness of the night. The 2 moons approached the middle of the sky, and their purple brilliance made the realm of the gods seem like a dream. On the ship, Yun Nuashing's body glowed faintly. Ever since he merged with the power of the stars, his body would automatically absorb the boundless power of the stars that drifted between heaven and earth every night. The light that flowed on the surface of his body was like a universe, flickering with faint starlight. Every time this happened, he would say self-deprecatingly, "It's like a lamp has been lit." Brother lit the lamp again. Seeing Yun Nuashing suddenly glowing, Ming shouted excitedly. His little hand caught the floating fluorescent light in the light. "Yun Nuashing, you don't have to light candles in the future." Xian covered her mouth and giggled, making the night sky much brighter. "Brother Nuashing, restrain the power of the stars. Otherwise, you won't be able to hide in the darkness in the future." At the bow of the ship, Lan Shiner also laughed. After teasing him, she immersed her mind into the ball of light in her palm. This was the language of the gods and the language of the modern world that Yun Nuashing had compiled during this period of time. Lan Shiner also put in a lot of effort to learn it because she was from the mythological era. If she didn't learn the language of the modern world, she wouldn't be able to communicate with Xian and the others. She couldn't always let Yun Nuashing translate for her every time. Girls needed to have some private conversations. Yun Nuashing didn't know whether to laugh or cry. The power of the stars flew to him on its own. It wasn't that he didn't want to control it, but that he couldn't control it at all. Use the power of the stars to wash your body. Over time, the marks of the stars will be engraved in your flesh. It's equivalent to forming a starry sky world. It will be of great help to adapt to the starry sky in the future. The netherworld ruin's sword appeared on his body and reminded him, making him feel even more helpless. Sigh. When Yuan Shi heard this, he looked at Yun Nuashing a little enviously and said, "The divine body of spiritual absorption. It's really amazing. Go away, you have the divine body. It can even be said that you can become a god. Why are you envious of my body, which no one knows about?" Hearing this, Yun Nuashing rolled her eyes and knocked him on the head. "But everyone in the world knows about the divine body. I've never heard of the divine body of spiritual absorption before. It's an even rarer body. Yuanshi laughed, picked up the wine jug next to him, and took a small sip. Yun Nuoxing rolled her eyes. Late at night, the few of them slept side by side on the deck. Yun Nuoxing stared at the stars, then looked down and sighed helplessly. He didn't know what to say when he slept. He had little Ming in his arms. Lan Shiner refused to go back to him, and insisted on using his arm as a pillow. On the other side, Xian looked at him. Although they didn't make any intimate movements, his eyes were full of eagerness. The two men stared at the sky with their eyes wide open. Yuanshi glanced at him and couldn't help but mutter, "Nuoxing, you've been torturing single people all day long. My health bar is almost empty." Yun Nuoxing was stunned and didn't understand. Sigh. Yuanshi sighed heavily and pointed at himself. He smiled bitterly and said, "Consider that there's a single dog here, okay?" Yun Nuoxing was stunned. Looking at the three beautiful girls, she smiled bitterly and shook her head. She said, "Brother, you think too much. These two are my sisters and this is my confidant. There's nothing between us. Hee little Cici feels lonely." Seeing this, Lan Xian unwillingly moved closer to Yun Nuoxing and mocked him with her stiff modern language. "Please don't torture me." Yuanshi looked up and roared. He wanted to cry but had no tears. "Calm down, pretend that you didn't hear anything. Go to sleep." Yun Nuoxing smiled silently. Late at night, a roar like that of an injured beast came from the riverside. It made the people who heard it shrink their neck. Bang! "Hey! Who crashed into the boat? Keep an eye on it." Early in the morning, Yun Nuoxing slowly woke up amidst the noise. Yun Nuoxing opened his eyes in a daze. What entered his eyes was a huge jade-colored object, sparkling and translucent like jade. On the side of the ship, many people stuck their heads out and looked down. Some of them frowned in dissatisfaction. Yun Nuoxing, who was in a daze, looked at the object for a long time. She rubbed her eyes and quickly woke them up. Then, she cupped her hands and apologized. "I'm sorry, everyone. I'm still in a daze." Hearing this, the people on the boat burst into laughter. Seeing that their boat was a little small, they asked them to get on. Seeing this, Yun Nuoxing smiled awkwardly. Long Xianin was a little conspicuous, so he deliberately made the boat smaller. It was only a few times bigger than a small boat. He didn't want to refuse their kindness. So, he put away the boat and landed on the boat with the others. After getting on the boat, they saw that it was very big. It was about 300 meters long. There were cultivators and some ordinary people on it. The sun was high in the sky, and it was very bright. This river was many times bigger than the one they drifted on at the beginning. There were many boats floating around, and all of them were either rich or noble. After waking up Xian, who was seriously in a daze, Yun Nuoxing went to pay the bill. However, he was rejected. He was a little confused. So, he asked about the situation here. It was not normal for so many boats to appear out of nowhere. "Don't you know? The Jiao Dragon King is celebrating his 100,000th birthday. His children are holding a celebration in the Jiao Dragon Palace. People from all over the world have come to celebrate the birthday. Many big shots have come. We're going to join in the fun and make friends with them. According to my master, we're doing good deeds." Yun Nuoxing was speechless. She blinked and said with a smile, "Your master is a very special person, isn't he?" "Of course." Speaking of this, the shipowner proudly straightened his back and rattled off a bunch of things, such as disaster relief, helping the poor, traveling around to help others, doing good deeds every day, and so on. His footprints were all over the great river, and he could be seen in half of the divine land. After 10 minutes, Yun Nuoxing smiled bitterly and left the excited owner of the boat. She quietly wiped the saliva on her face and could not help but mutter, "He's really good at talking." When she walked back to the deck, she saw a few young people surrounding Yuanshi. They kept talking, but their eyes were fixed on Xian, who was behind him. Yuan Shi also looked righteous and awe-inspiring as he stood in front of her. The majesty of the Yuan family's young master seeped out from his body. Yun Nuoxing raised her eyebrows and glanced left and right. She had a rough idea of what was going on, so she quickened her pace and walked over. "Hey, young master, we're just here to talk to this girl. What does it have to do with you?" The young man standing at the front was dressed in luxurious clothes and looked rather delicate. His eyes were fixed on Xian, who was hiding behind Yuan Shi as he smiled. Hearing this, Yuan Shi raised his eyebrows and looked at Xian, who was pouting behind him. He shrugged and said, "Can't you see that she's unwilling? Young man, you can't force someone to drink from a cow's head." Yuan Shi sighed with his hands on his waist. He was actually about the same age as these people. When he spoke, he sounded like an old man. Yun Nuoxing could not help but laugh. Hearing this, the young people frowned and looked at him coldly. Just as they were about to say something, Yun Nuoxing walked up from the side at the right time and put her arm around Xian's delicate shoulders. "What happened?" Yun Nuoxing smiled brightly as she pulled Xian slightly into her arms. Xian's pretty face blushed slightly when she was suddenly pulled into her arms. She was stunned for a moment, then she shook her head and smiled sweetly. "Nothing, just a small matter." Yun Nuoxing smiled and pinched her delicate nose. She turned to the young man and said with a smile, "Friend, what's wrong with my little girlfriend?" "Your girlfriend?" The young man's face stiffened when he heard this. He looked at the two of them and frowned as he asked in a deep voice, Yes. Is there a problem?" Yun Nuoxing nodded and smiled. In order to be more convincing, she reached out to touch Xian's head and glanced at the young man. The young man was stunned. Then he glared angrily at Yun Nuoxing and left dejectedly with his men. He even muttered something to himself. When she saw them leave, Yun Nuoxing calmly released her hand from Xian's shoulder. Then she calmly looked at the two suns in the sky and said nothing. Pfft! Seeing him like this, Xian could not help but laugh. She patted him with her lily-white hand and said coquettishly, "Bad Xingxing, you only know how to take advantage of me." Yun Nuoxing's face did not turn red and her heart did not skip a beat. She touched her head and said, "Hey, there are so many stars." "Nuoxing, do you still want me to believe that there's nothing going on between the two of you?" Yuan Shi could not help but roll his eyes. "There are so many white clouds. Brother is playing dumb again," Ming could not help but mutter. Chapter 301. The Jiao Dragon Palace was located on the only Sea of Life in the desolate north. It was even bigger than the sky-descending Sea of Rain country. This place had given birth to several powerful demonic beast kings. The Jiao Dragon, which had a bit of dragon blood, could be said to be the most powerful demonic beast in the world of demonic beasts, second only to the true dragon. The Jiao Dragon Palace had been passed down from ancient times to the present. The current Dragon King was a powerful figure who was famous in the northern wilderness. Today it was his 100,000th birthday. Many first-rate forces in the desolate north came to congratulate him. Of course, there were also some leaders who came in person. Many people wanted to get close to him. The Jiao Dragon King was like the sun in the sky now. With the constitution of a demon beast, he was invincible in the first level of the divine underworld. When he was still a divine emperor, he defeated 5 divine underworld warriors in a row. That battle was earth-shattering, and it made his name known. Yun Nuoxing and the others came as well. They stood on Fei Chui's ship and looked at the island with countless ships anchored in the distance. They couldn't help but gulp. The island was a sea blue color. Under the sunlight, ripples of light could be seen on its surface. The entire magnificent island was shrouded in a thin layer of fog, making it seem like a paradise on earth. At the top of the island, a blue dragon head stretched out, swallowing and spitting out the essence of the sun and moon. "It's actually an island formed from water. What a big deal." That old Dragon King's strength is unfathomable. Looking at the azure island and the incomparably huge liquid palace in the center that looked like a primordial beast crawling, Yun Nuoxing felt his mouth go dry. She looked at the bottom of the sea with the help of evil spirits' eyes. Under the sea, several huge dragon veins flowed from afar and gathered in this place. It was a natural treasure land. In such a place with abundant spiritual chi, even a pig could become a powerful warrior. No wonder it took root here. The dragon veins are all gathered here. It's enough to raise a first-rate force. Yun Nuoxing sighed in admiration. A layer of water curtain hung down from a height of 100 meters, covering the palace behind it. People kept entering through the opening under the water curtain, and there were even many young experts. Their vigorous vitality couldn't be concealed, and they weren't the illusions of the older generation. Yuanshi pulled someone aside and muttered a few words. Then, he walked back and said, "Although I don't have an invitation, I can still be treated as an honored guest if I can break through the water curtain on my own." Hearing this, Yun Nuoxing opened her evil spirit eye and stared at the water curtain. She stared blankly for a moment before smiling, a water curtain that contains the power of space. "No problem, let's go." Just as he was about to rush over, Lan Xian grabbed a few of them and flew over to the water curtain. With a palm strike, she created a big hole in the water curtain. Then, she brought the few of them into the water curtain. Yun Nuoxing and the others opened their mouths wide. They looked at Lan Xian and couldn't say a word for a long time. However, after thinking about it, they retracted their shock. To be able to escape from hundreds of divine underworld experts in the previous era, her strength was naturally very strong. Although it had been a few eras and she hadn't cultivated normally, the accumulation of her strength over time was still a terrifying amount. When the disciples of the Jiao Dragon Palace saw them, they didn't dare to be negligent. They respectfully welcomed them in. The old Dragon King had said that even if they entered with their strength, they had to treat them with caution. However, what surprised Yun Nuoxing and the others was that this floating island and the palace were just a gate. The palace was the entrance. The real place where the celebration was held was underwater, through a long underwater spatial tunnel. So many little dragons. Looking into the water, Ming exclaimed excitedly. She couldn't help but touch the Jiao Dragon Palace disciple beside her. She exclaimed in surprise, "Ah, it's so cold and so slippery." The disciple laughed bitterly. Although they could speak the human language, they had yet to transform into human form. They weren't like demons who were born in human form. Their bodies only retained some of the characteristics of beasts. If demonic beasts wanted to transform into human form, they had to cultivate continuously. "Ming, stop fooling around. Little dragons don't like to be touched." Yun Nuoxing patted Ming's head and laughed. Hearing this, Ming blinked her gem-like eyes and nodded. Little dragons laughed bitterly. Under the water, there was a magnificent group of palaces floating in the water. One could even say that it was an underwater city. A huge tower stood at the highest point of the city, looking very majestic. So many people. The old Dragon King sure has a lot of face. In the simple but luxurious tower, there was a huge area at the top. It was supposed to be an important place, but today it was used to welcome guests. It showed how much importance the old Dragon King and his descendants placed on this celebration. Yun Nuoxing chose a seat by the window. Seeing so many people, she couldn't help but comment. "Look, there are people from the Narcissus Palace here too. It's the Palace Lord and their goddess. Both of them are peerless beauties. The old Dragon King sure has a lot of face. Hey, lower your voice. Do you want to be heard by others? Actually, they're just here to take a look. Their real goal should be the place in the north." Speaking of which, is this true? Tana's water god temple is going to see the light of day again? Of course it's true. This forbidden zone has existed since ancient times. Some people speculate that it has existed for 3 or 4 eras. TSK. It's such a long time ago. You haven't seen it yet. All the major factions are making a move. Moreover, they should be out soon. When that time comes, a shocking battle will be unavoidable. What's in Tana's water god temple? Is it worth so many people coming to the Forbidden Zone? According to ancient records, Tana's water god temple used to be a pilgrimage place for all water elementalists in the world. It has existed for an immeasurable amount of time. It's said that even the gods went there to make a pilgrimage. There must be something incredible left behind. Otherwise, why would the gods have the time to go there? Moreover, it's something that's been separated by several eras. Even the top factions today would be tempted. Moreover, it's said that there was a divine underworld master who risked his life to barge in. When he came out, he was only left with a crippled soul. He only said one sentence and his soul collapsed. What sentence? I think he said something about the origin of water. I don't know what it is. People at the level of gods pay attention to different things. Hearing these discussions, Yun Nuoxing couldn't stay calm. He didn't expect the legendary Forbidden Zone, Tana's water god temple, to receive so much attention now. The world knew that it was about to see the light of day again. Things were going to get out of hand. Others didn't know, but he knew very well. What 3 or 4 eras? Damn it, that was a relic left behind from the mythological era. The origin of water, Yun Nuoxing murmured. She tilted her head and looked at Xian. Seeing that she was also looking at him, Mei Mao was looking at him. Both of them could see the excitement in each other's eyes. However, what followed was a kind of worry. Seeing her worried expression, Yun Nuoxing grabbed her little hand and comforted her. It's okay, I will help you get it. Moreover, the origin of water is one's own nature to choose good luck and avoid disaster. It will only be close to you. Okay. Xian nodded. Mei Mao kept staring at him and whispered, I'm just worried about you. Hearing this, Yun Nuoxing was just about to say, it doesn't matter. However, she remembered something and changed her words. Haha, I'll be careful. Don't worry. Suddenly, at the door, a few figures appeared. They were all dressed in green robes and were quite handsome. They walked as if they were flying. There was a hint of arrogance between their brows. One look and one could tell that they were the kind of people who were used to being arrogant. Those people walked in and directly walked to the table closest to them. They threw a portrait and shouted, Have you seen this person? After that, they didn't even look at them and went straight to the hall to search. That portrait was actually Yun Nuoxing's portrait. The people at the table furrowed their brows. Anyone would feel uncomfortable if they were being interrogated like this. However, they didn't meddle. They only glanced at the portrait and shook their heads, saying, No. Humph. I knew he wouldn't come. Hiding like a mouse is just a coward. That person sneered. He put away the portrait and walked quickly to the next table. Hey, are those people from the Qinghai Palace? Judging from their clothes, they should be. Some time ago, the Qi family and the receiving spirit divine physique were in a mess. The Qi family's divine son, Qi Haoyu, said that he would definitely kill the divine physique. The Qinghai Palace is on good terms with the Qi family. Moreover, the Qinghai Palace's divine son and Qi Haoyu are sworn brothers. This time, he might not need to do anything. Someone will do it for him. Hiss, so the Qinghai Palace is going to make a move on the divine physique? However, the divine physique should be hiding from the world and living in seclusion. With so many people watching, if it were me, I would have become a hermit long ago. Hey! The divine physique has a great treasure. Although those big forces didn't say what the divine physique had, it must be a great treasure. The Qi family is after it. Speaking of which, the Qinghai Palace came here from the distant Eastern Sea. They really have nothing better to do. Hearing this, Yun Nuoxing frowned. She smiled faintly and murmured, What a Qi family. Qi Haoyu, right? I'll remember this name. The Qi family is going all out for Ling Hongjian. Although many people know about Ling Hongjian's appearance, some people still don't know that you have it. Presumably, they don't want so many people to know. Yuan Shi sighed. Exclusive prey? Yun Nuoshing took a sip of tea and chuckled. Yuan Shi scratched his head and said, "That's not wrong. Hey, have you seen this guy?" Suddenly, a portrait was flung onto the table with a "pa" sound, causing the teacups to spill and the hot water to flow all over the table. At the side, the few young men in green didn't even look at them. This caused many people in the surroundings to frown. These people were too arrogant. Picking up the half-filled teacup and taking a sip, Yun Nuoshing patted Ming's head. "She didn't even look at those people. Boy, we're asking you a question. Are you deaf?" A young man said in a low voice and glared at him. His green eyes were filled with coldness. Slowly putting down the teacup, Yun Nuoshing glanced at him indifferently and said, "I'm here as a guest, not to be interrogated like a prisoner. If you really want to ask questions, please use a nicer tone." "Hee, you're quite stubborn," one of the young men sneered. His green eyes glowed as he stared at her with an unfriendly expression. A faint layer of energy quietly condensed in his hand. Seeing this, Yun Nuoshing sneered. She clenched the fingers of her right hand into a fist. Creaking sounds could be heard as the faint star energy was transferred to her palm. She even condensed into a few small talismans. "What? You still want to fight?" The atmosphere was a little tense. Seeing this, everyone quieted down. Looking at the situation that seemed like a fight to the death, they couldn't help but break out in cold sweat. At the same time, they looked at him with a little surprise. The Qinghai Palace was even more powerful than the Jiao Dragon Palace. No one wanted to provoke them. "Both of you, please don't be rash. Today is my father's birthday. I hope you can give me some face and not fight." Just when the atmosphere was about to collapse, a faint laughter broke the deadlock. One of the sons of the old Dragon King, who was wearing a navy blue robe, quickly stood between the two and suppressed the battle that was about to start. Hearing this, Yun Nuoshing glanced at this person. It wasn't good to cause trouble in someone else's territory. She nodded and dispersed the energy. "Since the master has said so," she said indifferently. The few people from the Qinghai Palace sneered and pointed at her. "For the sake of the Dragon King, we'll spare your dog life. In the future, you'd better tuck your tail between your legs when you're outside." Hearing this, not only did the Jiao Dragon King's son frown, but even the people around them couldn't stand it anymore. However, before they could say anything, they suddenly felt a strong burst of energy suddenly explode. "Meow, I've been pissing you off for a long time." Chapter 302. The sudden burst of aura caused everyone to feel uneasy. Before the blue-clothed man could say anything, a fist with a scarlet rune about a foot in size flashed in front of his eyes. Bang! The moment the fists made contact, a low muffled sound resounded throughout the entire hall, causing countless people's hearts to violently jump. Just as the fist made contact, the scarlet rune suddenly exploded, and a majestic impact surged out like a tide, directly smashing into that person's lower abdomen. Boom! Gotcha! The air wave from the rune's explosion overturned the floor within 2 to 3 meters, and the sound of bones breaking could be clearly heard. A figure flew straight out in the air. Under Yun Nuoshing's crushing fist, that person's lower abdomen had clearly caved in. His face immediately paled, and a large mouthful of green blood mixed with pieces of his internal organs sprayed out. Several wounds suddenly exploded all over his body from the inside out, and blood splattered everywhere, soaking his clothes. It was a very terrifying sight. His body flew out along the floor, smashing a few tables and chairs along the way, and then slammed into a wall 100 meters away. The powerful force caused cracks to spread out on the wall. Poochie! After suffering such a heavy blow, the Azure Sea Palace disciple couldn't help but spit out another mouthful of blood. His breathing was weak, and he was paralyzed on the ground. Even his body was deformed, and his hands and feet were bent into strange arcs. It was unknown whether he was dead or alive. Seeing this, everyone hurriedly dodged to the side. This person directly ignored the Azure Sea Palace's position, and presumably, he was also someone who couldn't bear to be taken advantage of. He definitely wouldn't submit to humiliation. There were still a few people here, and perhaps there would be a fierce battle. It was better to retreat early to avoid being implicated. We are people from the Azure Sea Palace. You dare to move? Ugh. A young man saw that one person was gone in a flash, and his face was a little pale. He pointed at Yun Nuoxing and shouted halfway, but the remaining half of his sentence was directly blocked by the people who came with him. Friend, please don't blame them. They just lost their minds. If they disturbed you, I will apologize to you. Another person walked up and clasped his fist at Yun Nuoxing. They were all quite strong, but Yun Nuoxing was even more ferocious. She crippled one of them with a single punch. She wasn't someone they could fight against. Ugh. Hearing this, the person whose mouth was covered immediately widened his eyes. It was unknown what he said. Usually, when they ran amok outside, others would have scruples on account of the Qinghai Palace and would not dare to make a move against them. But today, Yun Nuoxing did not put them in her eyes at all, making him feel very sullen. Shut up! A few of his companions shouted at him. Then, they hurriedly pulled the man who was lying by the wall, half dead, and ran out with their tails between their legs. After coldly watching the few of them slip away, Yun Nuoxing finally let out a sigh of relief. He cupped his hands towards the old Dragon King's son and said apologetically, "Brother, I'm really sorry for disturbing your mood. I'll go and apologize to your father later. Just put the losses here on my head." Hearing this, the person laughed bitterly and waved his hand, saying, "What's there to apologize for? Don't bother. Actually, I don't like them either. Just take it that you helped me vent my anger. Just call me Jiao Ruo." After that, he hurriedly ordered people to clean up the mess. Seeing this, the crowd did not say much. They all sat down and the silent hall returned to a few voices. "But brother, although those people are a little disgusting, I still advise you to leave quickly. Those who just came were just a few servants from Qingxian. I think the master of the house will be here soon to celebrate my father's birthday." Yun Nuoxing frowned and asked, "What is the background of the Qinghai Palace?" They sigh. The Qinghai Palace is a subsidiary of the Green Dragon tribe. They have a little dragon blood flowing in them. They are very powerful, comparable to the Jiao Dragon Palace. Green Dragon. Yun Nuoxing was stunned and could not help but frown. Everyone knew about the name of one of the four mythical beasts. Just like the phoenix, there was only one green dragon in the world. The rest were either descendants or clans that were tainted with dragon blood. Other than the long-extinct Void Spirit Dragon tribe, the Green Dragon tribe should be the most powerful tribe. Moreover, the Green Dragon tribe coexisted with demons and demonic beasts. One of the forces under them was the Qinghai Palace. Speaking of which, it was also because of the Green Dragon tribe. With a little dragon blood, it could stand out among the many demonic beasts. They are demons? Looking at the direction where the few people escaped, Yun Nuoxing was a little speechless. His fist did not touch any dragon scales. If there were dragon scales, it would have at least given him a strong recoil. They are just people with a little dragon blood. They are not even demons. Looking at the figure that disappeared into the distance, Yun Nuoxing scratched his head and sat down again. He had no intention of leaving at all. Seeing this, the people around could not help but be stunned. He knew that the other side's experts would come, but he did not do anything. Was he going to turn a blind eye? The people of the Qinghai Palace were so arrogant just now. I did not expect them to leave so easily. This is a strategic retreat. They are waiting for the divine son of the Qinghai Palace to come. Now that they can't beat him, they must leave. I wonder where this person came from. I have never heard of him before. Could he be here for the Tana's water god temple? Hey, I think it is not just him. The people around him have a little extraordinary aura. Maybe he is the young master of some first-class force or the divine son. In the hall, everyone was discussing, but no one had an accurate answer. This made the few people who were listening feel a little helpless. They could not even come out quietly to have a cup of tea. What kind of trouble had they suffered? After taking a sip of the new tea, Yun Nuoshing yawned lazily and said with a smile, "Well, we did not provoke others. Naturally, we will not be bullied by others. But we offended a force." Yuan Shi shrugged indifferently. Looking at the two's indifference, Xian could not help but sigh. He pulled Yun Nuoshing and whispered, "There won't be any trouble, right? It's just two random loaches. What trouble can there be?" Hearing this, Yun Nuoshing laughed unconcernedly. "Not that. I mean, they won't pull out your constitution, right?" Xian rolled his eyes and asked. Hearing this serious question, Yun Nuoshing and Yuan Shi were stunned for a moment. After a long while, Yun Nuoshing laughed dryly and said, "Probably, maybe, there won't be a problem. If I don't use the divine weapon, who will know who I am?" Of course, the divine weapon was now his biggest feature. If he wanted to hide his identity, he might have to use less weapons in the future. In order to reduce the risk of his identity being exposed, he had no choice. After all, the whole world was paying attention to the divine body of spiritual absorption. Report, Qing Xian of the Qinghai Palace is here to congratulate you. In less than an hour, a disciple of the Jiao Long Palace at the door reported loudly. His loud voice reached everyone's ears. Everyone turned to look at Yun Nuoshing, wanting to see his reaction. Of course, many people went out to welcome him. The Qinghai Palace was very powerful, so many people wanted to make friends with them, especially the Son of God. He was so young and already had such power. How could someone who could become sworn brothers with the Son of God of the Qi family be ordinary? There weren't many rumors about Qing Xian. Just like the Shenxis of the major powers, they rarely showed themselves in public and there weren't many earth-shattering events. However, the title of Shenxi was enough to explain some things. Those who could be crowned with this title were all heaven's favored children with outstanding talents and strength. At the entrance, a handsome young man slowly walked in. His long black hair was casually draped over his shoulders. He was dressed in a simple green robe that did not reveal his status. His green eyes were as calm as water, and no one could tell what he was thinking. Although this person was not the type that was shockingly handsome, he was the kind of man that was more interesting the more you looked at him. His calm appearance was somewhat refined, as if he was a lotus that wandered in the mortal world and was untainted by the secular world. Beside him were the few people who ran away with their tails between their legs. At this moment they were surrounded by a group of people. Qing Xian's appearance attracted the attention of some of the female disciples at the scene. All of them were discussing softly, and their beautiful eyes were filled with extraordinary splendor. When this person came in, he did not roar like what others expected. Instead, he looked as calm as water, as if he did not see the resentful eyes of the people around him. "Brother Qing Xian." Jiao Rong greeted him with a smile. Although he did not have a good impression of those people, this was the Son of God of the Qinghai Palace. No matter what, he had to be polite. No one could find fault with his etiquette. There were many people around him. Other than the few people who had just been chased away, there were also some young people who were also dressed in green. They seemed to be from the Qinghai Palace. At this time, they were looking at Yun Nuoshing with an unfriendly face. There were some people around, so Qing Xian could not act like it was not a big deal. He responded with a faint smile. However, the few people around him rushed over aggressively and slapped Yun Nuoshing's teacup away. "Kid, you can really keep your composure and still have the mood to drink tea. My Son of God is here. Don't you know how to greet him?" The person who said this was the one who had his mouth covered. His words were full of hatred. His voice was raised a few octaves, and even the people in front could hear it. When everyone saw this, they called him an idiot. Did you not see the miserable state that person was in? Now you are provoking him? He is not leaving. It is obvious that he is not afraid of your Son of God. 3 seconds, get lost. 5 seconds, fly out. 10 seconds, disappear. Choose one. Yun Nuoshing raised his head, narrowed his eyes, and said lightly. Then, he took another cup, poured another cup of tea, and slowly tasted it. Kid, you are still so stubborn in the face of disaster. Why don't you fly first and let me see? Hearing this, that person was so angry that he laughed. He reached out and grabbed Yun Nuoshing. Boom! A deafening muffled sound suddenly rang out, attracting everyone's attention. Then, a gust of wind suddenly blew from Yun Nuoshing's side, messing up everyone's hair in the hall. Pfft! The sudden sound of someone vomiting blood was particularly loud. Before anyone could react, they saw a green figure flying across the hall, spitting blood, spinning a dozen times, and then falling heavily on the ground. Bam! The muffled sound of the body falling on the ground made everyone grimace. The strong force directly shook the hard floor, forming a few thumb-sized cracks. That person was lying on the ground, his eyes were white, and it was unknown whether he was dead or alive. In the distance, Yun Nuoshing maintained his posture of leaning forward and stretching out his palm. He glanced at the person on the ground, then retracted his hand and sat down slowly. Hiss! Everyone gasped. Not only did he cripple an immortal-level expert with one palm, he did it under the eyes of his master. How unscrupulous was this person to be able to do such a thing? Clap, clap. Suddenly, there was a burst of crisp applause in the hall. Everyone was stunned and their expressions changed. Who was so bold to clap at this time? However, when they saw who it was, their expressions instantly became even stranger. Because the person who was clapping was Qing Xian. At this time, he was smiling. There was no anger or resentment at all. His faint smile was a little unfathomable. Brother, you have good skills. I wonder if you are interested in learning from each other? His smile was warm and charming. Chapter 303. The atmosphere in the hall seemed to have frozen. Only Qing Xian was laughing heartily. Behind him lay a person who was foaming at the mouth and didn't know whether he was dead or alive. His laughter shook everyone. Were they really going to go all out? No, I'm not interested. Yun Nuoshing shook his head and stared at him without blinking. He said, Didn't you want to help someone deal with the divine body? Now you're not conserving your strength but casually looking for someone to spar with? Behind him, when Yuanxi heard this, she quickly covered her mouth and raised her eyebrows high. She had a look that said, I'm not laughing. The people around them couldn't help but roll their eyes. You're actually laughing. Is Nuoshing trying to argue? They're going to fight anyway. Yuanxi covered his mouth and mumbled to himself. Hee hee. Hearing this, Qing Xian nodded and said, The divine body is the divine body. It's only a matter of time before I fight with him. But now... He glanced at the disciple of Qinghai Palace who was twitching on the ground and then stared at Yun Nuoshing. He smiled faintly and said, Although these guys are too arrogant and frivolous, as a fellow member of Qinghai Palace, I have to get an explanation. Yun Nuoshing raised his eyebrows and crossed his arms. He said, How do you want to settle this? How about a peaceful spar? No matter the result, today's matter will be written off. Qing Xian smiled. Staring at Qing Xian who was smiling calmly, Yun Nuoshing couldn't help but frown. This fellow seemed to want to fight on purpose. Of course, it wasn't that he was afraid of Qing Xian, it was just that he was too lazy to make a move. But now, it seemed that Qing Xian didn't have the heart to do so. All right. Hearing this, Yun Nuoshing sighed and nodded. Qing Xian of Qinghai Palace, Qi Haoyu of Qi family, and the divine sons and divine daughters of other families. All of them are geniuses. However, they are hidden too deeply by their respective forces. Usually, I haven't seen them fight. Today, I'm lucky enough to see one of them fight. It's going to be a fierce battle. That young man is obviously a powerful character. However, I don't know if he's a match for Qing Xian. Although it's a friendly match, it's still worth watching. Qing Xian only smiled faintly when she heard the discussions in the surroundings. She then cupped her hands towards Jiao Rong and said, "Brother Jiao, can you lend us a piece of empty land?" "Of course." Jiao Yen glanced at the two of them and nodded helplessly. After that, he waved at the two of them and walked out first. The Jiao Dragon platform was a flat, underwater mountain. It was as if a mountain had been sliced off from the middle of the mountain by someone. Someone had used a special method and a formation to solidify it, making it extremely hard. Not far away, there were many other platforms that the people of the Jiao Dragon Palace used as training grounds. Standing on the flat mountain, the Jiao Dragon City shone brightly in the distance. It was like a bright lamp at the bottom of the sea. Outside the barrier, it was so dark that it was impossible to see clearly. Occasionally, one could see a flicker of phosphorescence, as if something was swimming across the sea. Looking up at the Jiao Dragon City that was like a small sun in the distance, it was the only thing that was glowing. The 1,000-meter sea water had blocked out the sunlight and nothing could be seen. It was very dark and lonely. If it wasn't for the barrier and the flow of energy that provided light, no one would be able to see anything. Jiao Yen left Yun Nuoxing and Jiao Yen there. Then, he arranged for everyone to sit on the mountain next to it so that others could observe. He also stayed behind and ordered someone to go back and report the situation here. He didn't want the old Dragon King to think that no one had come to congratulate him. In the arena, Qing Xian still looked calm. Her gaze swept across Yun Nuoxing. Then, she bowed slightly and cupped her hands, saying, "I am Qing Xian." Not far away, Yun Nuoxing saw her like this and was stunned for a moment. Then, she quickly did as she was told. She knew that this was a kind of etiquette before the battle. She said, "Yuan Xing." Qing Xian smiled faintly. Just as she finished speaking, layers of green flames suddenly surged out from her body. Finally, it turned into a curtain of fire that enveloped her entire body. With the appearance of the green flames, the temperature of the space quietly rose by a lot. Fire element. Yun Nuoxing looked at the green energy that enveloped Qing Xian. On it, the energy was rolling like flames, but it wasn't the usual fiery red color. "Brother Yuan, be careful. This green flame is a kind of inherited flame of my Qinghai Palace. It's called the Jade Dragon Flame. Although it isn't a divine flame, its power isn't comparable to ordinary flames. I once used it to injure a half-demon expert." Qing Xian smiled faintly as she held a ball of green flame in her fair palm. Looking at the smiling Qing Xian, Yun Nuoxing nodded slightly. Under the gaze of countless people, her slender white palm slid out from her black robe. Under the curious gaze of countless people, she slightly clenched her fist, and a ball of blue flame appeared. This flame was the first type of flame that she had subdued. It was called the demonic whale flame. It was taken from the body of a demonic whale of unknown strength. Ever since she obtained the purple night flame, she had merged it with her flame and never used it alone. "It's also the fire element?" Qing Xian sighed softly. Her eyes were fixed on the flame. After a moment, a surge of battle intent seeped out from her body. "Why did you release the elements before the battle even started? Wouldn't it be more surprising if you kept it? What do you know? Didn't you hear Qing Xian say that it's a peaceful battle? It's not a battle of life and death. In such a peaceful battle, you have to show your element to your opponent at the beginning. This is an unwritten rule that has been passed down for a long time. It's also the fire element. This battle will be a bit difficult. The power of the same element will more or less cancel each other out. It's hard to say. Who knows if they have any trump cards? Seeing that both of them were ready for battle, the crowd quickly stretched their necks and moved closer to the barrier so that they could see the battle clearly. Brother Yuan, use your full strength. Taking a deep breath, Qing Xian suddenly raised her head and shouted. Her eyes were filled with surging battle intent. As soon as her voice fell, the blue flame in Qing Xian's hand suddenly burst out and turned into two slender whips. The blue flame surged out from behind her and her body turned into a shadow. Holding the two flame whips, she threw them at Yun Nuoxing. The space where the flame whips passed was slightly distorted. Yun Nuoxing held the blue flame with both of her hands. Then, she tightened her grip. The blue flame surged out and condensed into the shape of a giant sword. The two blue flames were like fairies, dancing around the giant sword. If one looked closely, they would realize that the giant flame sword was actually the Netherworld Ruin Sword. She stretched out her two hands, holding a giant sword in each hand. Looking at the flame whips that were speeding towards her, she raised the giant sword high and slashed it down without any fancy moves. The blue flame giant sword and the blue flame whips collided, exploding into countless sparks. The flame whips suddenly broke apart and dissipated in the air. Qing Xian's body spun in the air as the sea of blue flames churned. Her hands flew and condensed a thick spiral flame all. It spun beside her and emitted a humming sound. As soon as the green flame all was formed, it pointed straight at Yun Nuoxing. Because it was spinning at such a high speed, it even brought with it circles of flames like slender snakes winding around it. Go! Qing Xian took a deep breath and pressed her palm down on Yun Nuoxing. The flame all brought with it a sharp sound as it rushed downwards, bringing with it a 10-meter-wide flame tail. Yun Nuoxing's brows twitched when she clearly felt the violent energy that came with the flame all. Her gaze was fixed on the flame all that was speeding towards her. She opened her evil spirit eye and the flame all's speed suddenly slowed down. Of course, it didn't mean that the flame all's speed had slowed down. It was just that it had slowed down in her line of sight. She could even see it clearly as it rotated very slowly. Looking at the attack range of the flame all, Yun Nuoxing agilely leaped and her body flew close to the flame all. In a flash, she suddenly appeared in front of Qing Xian, and the giant sword in her hand viciously slashed at his shoulder. The giant sword suddenly froze when it was swung out. Qing Xian's palm was wrapped in blue flames and held the blue flame giant sword. His shoulder shook and the force on the blue flame giant sword was completely offset. Under the scorching heat of the blue flame, the giant sword even started to turn illusory. When the two came into contact, there was a violent energy churning, causing them to quickly release each other and retreat a distance away. Brother Yuan, your blue flame doesn't seem to be as strong as my blue flame. Qing Xian smiled faintly as she rubbed her palm. Qing Xian's expression suddenly changed when her voice sounded. She quickly turned around and her palm that was covered in blue flames directly covered a blue flame fist that suddenly rushed out from the void. Bang! When the palm and fist collided, a blazing wind surged in the air. Yun Nuoxing and Qing Xian both retreated a distance away from each other. Yun Nuoxing stuck out her tongue when Qing Xian hit her in the right position. She looked at him and said, "Lesson number 1 in fighting, shut up when fighting." Brother Yuan, this is a peaceful exchange of pointers. Qing Xian's face twitched twice as he smiled bitterly. If it weren't for his sharp senses, he would have been beaten to the ground. The strength of that fist was frighteningly strong. All right, I'll remember it. Yun Nuoxing helplessly scratched her head and said. Looking at the helpless Yun Nuoxing, Qing Xian smiled faintly and shook his head. He took a step forward and a majestic aura suddenly burst out from his body in an earth-shattering manner. As soon as this aura appeared, it instantly swept across the entire space. Yun Nuoxing was startled and quickly retreated a few steps before she could stabilize herself. 8th tier Immortal Step. Yun Nuoxing's face trembled and he couldn't help but touch the back of his head. It was only now that he understood why these people's names were always mentioned. It turned out that their normal strength really surpassed his by a lot. Qing Xian didn't look much older than him, but there was such a huge gap between them. Yun Nuoxing took a deep breath and his mind moved. He completely released his surging aura. At the same time, the two blue flame giant swords that were floating beside him turned purple. Purple flames gushed out from his body without reservation. The temperature of the space suddenly increased by countless times. Even the people who were separated by two barriers could feel the scorching heat. Yun Nuoxing didn't dare to be careless when facing an opponent who was several realms higher than him. Although the Netherworld Ruins sword could beat him to a pulp, this wasn't a life-and-death battle. He still had to rely on himself. Brother Yuan isn't bad either. The purple flame lingered and looked at the green flame from afar. When the purple night flame appeared, the green flame even fluctuated and was unknowingly weakened. In front of the god of all flames, other flames naturally had to retreat. Qing Xian was a little surprised as she looked at it. She smiled faintly and did not hesitate. Her hand seals changed into a series of complicated seals. The green fire behind her seemed to be boiling under the hand seals. The temperature became hotter and hotter. A green fire dragon that was dozens of feet long condensed behind her back. It was a little illusory. Roar! As soon as the fire dragon was formed, it let out a dragon roar and circled around Qing Xian. Its two dragon eyes stared at Yun Nuoxing. Although it wasn't a real dragon, it released a faint dragon aura. Green dragon strangle. As the fire dragon became more and more solid, Qing Xian let out a loud shout. The fire dragon that was releasing a faint dragon's might instantly swept out and let out an earth-shattering roar. It was like a bolt of green lightning that streaked across space and attacked Yun Nuo planet. Dragon aura. Is it because of the green dragon bloodline? Yun Nuoxing was a little surprised when she felt the faint dragon aura contained in the fire dragon. She looked at the huge dragon that was whizzing towards her with a grave expression. The two of them had crossed a great distance. If she wasn't serious, she might be injured. Gently exhaling, Yun Nuoxing grabbed a huge purple flame sword in each hand and smashed them together, fusing them into one. Purple and blue flames swirled around the sword like a spiral. Then, he took a step forward, raised the huge purple and blue sword above his head, and slashed down fiercely. Netherworld firmament slash. As the huge sword slashed down, a huge bluish-purple sword ray that was more than 10 feet long shot out from the sword. It was like a perfect crescent arc that shot towards the green dragon. Boom! Two frightening energies violently erupted in midair. A three-colored energy storm swept out from the middle at an extremely fast speed. This firestorm covered the entire space in the blink of an eye. The frightening energy struck the energy barrier until it shook a little. However, it did not show any signs of breaking. The huge flaming storm wreaked havoc and continuously attacked the barrier. Even the surrounding seawater was stirred up by the impact. Seeing this scene, the people in the distance were a little surprised. Although they were far away, they could still faintly feel the blazing energy. At this moment, the figure of a middle-aged man suddenly appeared in front of the crowd. The middle-aged man patted Jiao Meng's shoulder as soon as he appeared. He then raised his hand and gently clenched it towards the barrier in the distance. An invisible wave was emitted. The flaming storm within the barrier was instantly reversed and finally disappeared. Father! Seeing the middle-aged man, Jiao Meng was stunned for a moment before he hurriedly called out. The surrounding people were stunned for a moment. They didn't expect that even the Jiao Dragon King would appear. The Jiao Dragon King waved his hand. Looking at the flaming storm that had been annihilated, he smiled faintly and said, "Two interesting little fellows." Hearing his words, the crowd was stunned. They quickly turned their gazes over and saw that the flaming storm had dissipated. The figures of Yun Nuoxing and Qing Xian were revealed. At this moment, The two of them had disheveled hair and their robes were charred black. They were breathing rapidly, and a large patch of their faces was black as if they had been fished out of a coal mine. Yun Nuoxing was slightly better. When she was revealed, the golden light hurriedly disappeared. It was obvious that she had used a divine artifact to block some of the energy, so she didn't suffer any injuries. On the other hand, Qing Xian's upper body was bare. It seemed that Yun Nuoxing had the upper hand in the confrontation. After all, she had a divine artifact protecting her body. Who could do anything to her? That, brother, you should put on some clothes. Seeing that Qing Xian's upper body was bare and covered in dirt, Yun Nuoxing embarrassedly turned her face away and laughed dryly. Qing Xian was stunned. Seeing that her upper body was bare, she was a little embarrassed. She hurriedly took out a set of clothes and put them on. Then, she cupped her fists towards Yun Nuoxing and said, "Brother Yuan, I have lost." Chapter 304. After 3 moves, they competed in elements, strength, and secret technique. After 3 moves, they stopped. This was the so-called peaceful exchange of pointers. It wasn't like the usual exchanges where they would fight for 300 rounds, causing the sky to darken and the earth to shatter. It was a relatively gentle exchange of pointers. Everyone in the distance widened their eyes. They did not understand what was going on. Qing Xian, who had the upper hand, lost just like that? This is just a small exchange of pointers. If it was a life and death battle, my Shensi would not be weaker than him. Seeing this, the disciples of the Qinghai Palace could not help but whisper softly. Everyone did not comment on this sentence. In fact, they could see the depth of these 3 moves. They did not have to fight for hundreds of rounds. It could even be said that these 3 moves condensed the competition of the entire battle. Qing Xian lost, but she might not win the life and death battle. After 3 moves, it was obvious that Qing Xian was more embarrassed. Although she was stronger, she could not do anything to Yun Nuoxing, who was protected by a divine instrument. Although no one knew that the latter was using a divine instrument, even the gods might not be able to detect it. "Brother, you flatter me. I just took advantage of the flame." Hearing this, Yun Nuoxing smiled bitterly and cupped her hands. If she did not use the divine mirror of light to protect herself at the last moment, Qing Xian would be topless and she would have to run around naked. Being able to have outstanding means is naturally a kind of strength. Brother Yuan, you don't have to be humble. I lost this battle. According to what I said just now, no matter who wins or loses, the grudges between us will be written off. Qing Xian waved her hands and laughed. Her calm demeanor caused the gazes of the female disciples from afar to be filled with splendor. From their perspective, even though Qing Xian had lost, she still appeared graceful and elegant. That young man is also powerful. He defeated the Qinghai Palace's Shensi. He is also handsome. I wonder if he has a partner? Little girl, are you in love? Didn't you see that purple-haired girl? That is her partner. You don't have a chance. I didn't say anything. Are you thinking about it? Screw you. Even though they were separated by 2 barriers and a sea, Yun Nuoxing could still hear some of the discussion. He couldn't help but roll his eyes. However, for some reason, he glanced at Xian and found that she was also looking at him. He blushed and quickly looked away. Brother Yuan's luck with women is not bad. Qing Xian naturally heard these voices and couldn't help but tease him, causing him to roll his eyes again. After the peaceful exchange of pointers, everyone returned to the tower in the Jiao Dragon City. The scene was still lively. During the battle just now, many people had come. At this time, another large wave of people poured in. Even though the hall was very spacious, it still seemed a little crowded. Some people even had no place to sit after returning. However, after Jiao Ru quickly ordered people to add more seats, this matter was settled. The hall was full. Qing Xian greeted Yun Nuoxing and offered him a cup of tea. Then, she said that she had to leave. She went straight to the other side of the hall, and stopped in front of a table. At that table, there was a middle-aged man sitting upright. He had a small tuft of beard on his chin. When he frowned, he looked dignified without being angry. Yun Nuoxing and the others stayed for a while. When Jiao Ru and the old Dragon King said something on the stage and the atmosphere in the hall became lively, they quietly slipped out. A few disciples of the Jiao Dragon Palace also respectfully welcomed them out. When they came out to the sea again, they looked at the blue island behind them. Then, they took out Long Xian Yin's boat, enlarged it to 10 meters, and boarded. "Brother, I'm not full yet." On the boat, Ming could not help but grumble. She tugged at Yun Nuoxing's sleeve. Before she left, she stuffed a few buns into her mouth. She was blaming Yun Nuoxing for leaving too quickly. "Hee, little greedy cat, I have something for you to eat." Yun Nuoxing rubbed her head and took out a jade box. When she opened it, it was the food from the banquet just now. There was everything. Ming was drooling when she saw it. She turned around and abandoned him. She turned around and focused on the food. "Eat slowly, no one will take your food." Yun Nuoxing looked at little Ming, who was wolfing down her food, and patted her head dotingly. She looked at Ming with amusement for a while. Then, he looked at the endless sea. In fact, this was not the sea. It was just a very wide water source. This huge river flowed all the way to the East Sea. Although it was insignificant compared to the East Sea, it was already a vast sea in a place like the northern wilderness. "Should we speed up?" She slowly looked away and looked at Yun Nuoxing. Yun Nuoxing raised her head and looked at him in confusion. She did not know why he wanted to speed up the process. Seeing her like this, She scratched his head and said, "Well, the news about the Tana's Water God's temple has spread. I'm thinking if we should speed up the process." He was also told that Xian had a 5 elements body later. At that time, he was stunned for half a day and almost turned to stone. Looking at the loving couple, a sense of powerlessness rose in his heart. Although he had the famous god's spirit body, there were 2 legendary super physiques in front of him. It was said that there were only 8 people in the entire Great Yuan realm, with Yun Nuoxing being the 9th. The 5 elements body was estimated to be no more than 30 people. But now, both of them appeared at the same time. It was really driving people crazy. Yun Nuoxing suddenly understood. Then, she shook her head and said, "It's okay. We can't go now. Didn't I say that the gods' underworld experts will turn into ashes when they come out? Then we definitely can't go in." "Okay." Hearing this, She rubbed his hands and looked at Xian. Then, he looked at Yun Nuoxing. Suddenly, he joked, "Then what about sister-in-law's water origin? There are so many people in the world eyeing it." As soon as he said this, Yun Nuoxing and Xian spat out a mouthful of water at the same time. Their faces turned red and their eyes widened. When their eyes met, they looked away shyly. What sister-in-law? Xian and I really don't have that kind of relationship," Yun Nuoxing said in a panic. Her face was even redder than the 2 suns in the sky. Suddenly, she changed the topic and looked at Shi calmly. She said, "Say, you know that Qianqian likes me, but you still call her that. Are you really a man? What's wrong with that? In the gods' realm, it's nothing to have 3 or 4 wives. It doesn't matter if you don't have one. It's fine as long as you treat the 2 girls well." Unexpectedly, Shi shrugged and looked like he didn't care. This made Yun Nuoxing collapse directly. Her face twitched rapidly. Yun Nuoxing's face was so red that she was almost hysterical. She roared, "This? What the hell? I'm very loyal, okay? So you're only marrying one? Then who do you like? Why are you so determined?" Hearing this, Shi laughed strangely. Yun Nuoxing's body stiffened. Her eyes were blank. After a while, she muttered, I don't know, huh?" This time, it was Shi's turn to be dumbfounded. "If you don't like anyone, why are you so determined?" I'm still an innocent young man. Seeing this, Yun Nuoshing suddenly changed back to her beautiful face and said in a coquettish voice. She even patted Yuan Shi lightly with her lily-white hand and swayed her small waist. Her flirtatious appearance almost made him vomit. Yuan Shi touched his chest and gasped for breath. His face was purple. Although this face was definitely that of a budding young girl, he knew the truth. This was a 100% young man. He was just a crossdresser. Xing, you look like a girl. At this moment, Xian covered her mouth and looked at him with a smile. She said something that directly struck his soul. Hearing this, Yun Nuoshing's legs turned to jelly. She directly knelt on the ground. Her face instantly turned pale. She looked up at the sky and roared in grief, "No! It's not like that. You look so beautiful when you're in pain." Xian smiled and followed up with another attack. She made him want to cry but had no tears. Seeing her smiling so happily, Yun Nuoshing was displeased. Her face flashed red and blue, and she changed back to her current handsome face. Then, she directly moved her face closer. Her fingers lifted Xian's pure white chin, and she said with a sly smile, "Little girl, smile for me." He originally thought that Xian would blush and move away. In the end, she only blushed. Then, she bloomed a beautiful smile that could make the whole world pale in comparison. That gentle look made Yun Nuoshing's heart melt. For a moment, he actually forgot to let go. The distance between their faces was less than 3 inches. Yuan Shi was also stunned by that smile. For a moment, he was absent-minded. After a moment, he pursed his lips and muttered, "Tisk, they're torturing single people again." On the side, little Ming, who had transformed into a foodie, looked up and saw the two of them. She wrinkled her little nose, carried the jade box, and tiptoed behind Yun Nuoshing. While they were in a daze, she reached out her little hand and pushed him, at such a short distance. Even if Yun Nuoshing had the fastest light element in the world, it would still take a few tenths of a second for him to change his vision, transmit the nerve signals to his brain, and react. In such a short time, even if the god of time came, he wouldn't be able to stop time in time. So, the moment his vision swayed, Yun Nuoshing only saw that peerlessly beautiful face sticking close to him. His lips touched something warm and soft. After a few tenths of a second, his slow brain finally reacted. His face turned pale, and in an instant it turned blood red. He almost stopped thinking. Xian also stared blankly at him. The blue sea, the blue sky, the gentle wind, the small boat, and the sea breeze, all of this was quite a nice scene. Just now, when she was being teased, she really did smile according to his wishes. Who would have thought that such an unforeseen event would happen, and she would carelessly lose her first kiss? Their faces couldn't be any redder. When their eyes met, they felt as if time had stopped at this moment. The sound of breathing, the sound of the wind, and the frantic heartbeat, everything disappeared. The only rhythm that existed in their minds was chaos. Damn. Even if it's not sister-in-law this time, it has to be sister-in-law. Ming, beautifully done. After Yuan Shi reacted, he suddenly jumped up excitedly as if he had discovered a huge secret. He even hurriedly gave little Ming a thumbs up. Ming, godly assist. I like it. I give full marks for this assist. In Yun Nuoshing's spiritual world, Ziyi, who hadn't spoken to him for a long time, also jumped up excitedly at this moment. He took out his diary in a fluster, and because he was so excited, he even made a lot of mistakes. Don't thank me too much. Hearing this, Ming wrinkled his little nose indifferently. He put a snack in his mouth and chewed it. He looked at the two petrified people and smiled slyly. After a long time, Yun Nuoshing finally reacted. As if she had been electrocuted, she suddenly screamed and hurriedly jumped back. Looking at Mei Mao's empty eyes, Xian, who looked like she had lost her soul, turned pale with fright. She hurriedly grabbed her hand and cried out in panic, Xian? Xian, that... I didn't do it on purpose. I didn't do it on purpose. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I, Zien, who heard the cry, also pulled back her wandering soul at this moment. The moment her soul returned to her body, her heart beat violently, like a little deer running around. When she saw Yun Nuashing calling her in a panic, she felt a little indescribable in her heart. It seemed like she was happy, but also a little worried about her gains and losses, and also a little at a loss. Xing. Finally, Zien opened her red lips. What? Yun Nuashing shivered and glared fiercely at Ming, who was smiling foolishly. Then, she hurriedly pricked up her ears to listen. Zien's face was red. She opened her mouth but didn't say anything. Mei Mao's eyes were a little misty. In the end, she just shook her head and said, "No, it's nothing. Zien, I really didn't do it on purpose. I didn't. Seeing her like this, Yun Nuashing panicked even more. She was about to go crazy. Seeing how anxious she was, Zien chuckled and touched her hand. She smiled faintly and said, "I don't blame you. Just a little, let me calm down." After she finished speaking, she got up and walked to the front of the boat, leaving Yun Nuashing alone in the wind. He felt his heart turn cold. Seeing that Ming had already eaten her fill and was rubbing her tummy contentedly, Yun Nuashing suddenly felt a rush of anger in his heart. His hair stood on end and he flew into a rage out of humiliation. He pulled her into his arms and started to rub her head viciously. He roared angrily, "Ah! It's all because of you, little girl. What are you doing? You have to know when you're joking, dear. Big brother. Weren't you enjoying yourself just now? You even kissed me for so long and didn't let go." Ming pouted when she heard him. She stared at him pitifully and mumbled. Hearing this, Yun Nuashing was so angry that he laughed. He patted her head and smiled bitterly. "How was that enjoying? We were almost scared out of our wits. Anyway, don't do that in the future. It's fine if we know each other, but if it's someone you don't know and you cause trouble, it'll be fun," Yun Nuashing instructed patiently. "Oh." Ming nodded. She turned her bright gem-like eyes and said, "Then I can do this between Big Brother and Big Sister Zien in the future?" A row of dense black lines suddenly appeared on Yun Nuashing's forehead. He felt that this little girl was going to drive him crazy. Absolutely. No way. Chapter 305. The surface of the water was calm, without even a single wave. The silver boat pushed open the water and floated alone on this lonely ocean. In the sky, one or two huge seabirds would occasionally fly by and let out two cries. The two suns hung high in the sky, casting down the brilliant sunlight. The silver light reflected was very conspicuous. Zien sat cross-legged at the bow of the boat. The cool sea breeze blew, bringing with it a faint fishy smell. Her dark purple hair swayed gently in the wind. The golden sunlight shone on her beautiful face, leaving a long golden glow. Her long eyelashes fluttered slightly under the golden light. She looked incomparably holy and hazy like a dream. Yun Nuashing, who was behind her, saw this beautiful appearance and was a little anxious. He admitted that this appearance was quite attractive, but after what had just happened, he was not in the mood to appreciate it. Zien was so calm that he was a little worried. Normally, in this situation, a girl should be furious, right? However, Lan Xen was sitting beside Zien. She had been sitting there, holding the ball of light and learning the language seriously. Yun Nuashing was anxious and quickly whispered to her. Lan Xen's little ears twitched, and the ball of light gradually dimmed. Lan Xen put it away and looked back at Yun Nuashing. She blinked at Mei Mao and then looked at Zien. At this time, the latter's face was blank. Her jade fingers were touching her red lips, and her cheeks were a little red. Lan Xen chuckled and moved her but to sit beside Zien. When she saw her indescribable expression, the corners of her mouth curled up. She suddenly smiled and said, "Zien, I didn't expect you to like Brother Nuashing." "Ah." Ziyen, who was in a daze, was startled by this voice that suddenly rang out. When she finally reacted to what she had said, her charming face suddenly flushed red. She hurriedly waved her jade-like hands and said in a panic, "No, no. What's there to hide?" Seeing this, Lan Xian was even more convinced. She smiled faintly and said, "We are all girls. How can we not tell if we like someone? You don't have to feel ashamed about this. Brother Nuashing is so outstanding. If a girl doesn't like him, then there is a problem." As soon as he said this, not to mention Xian's reaction, Yun Nuashing, who accidentally overheard him, almost choked on her saliva. She coughed violently, patted her chest hard, and rolled her eyes. Yuan Shi and Ming were a little confused. "What are you talking about? I asked you to enlighten Xian, but you're talking about me." Yun Nuashing rolled her eyes and waved at Yuan Shi and the others, indicating that it was nothing. When Xian heard this, her delicate body stiffened. She slowly put down her lily-white hands and stared blankly at the calm sea. She seemed to be in a daze. No one knew what she was thinking. After a long time, she sighed and turned around. She looked at Lan Shiner and murmured, "Is this love? I don't know. I don't know. What does it feel like to like someone? What kind of emotion is it? I don't know. My heart is in a mess." If these words were heard by Zai, he would definitely be called an emotional idiot again. Turned out that these two people were like blank sheets of paper when it came to relationship. They didn't know anything and hadn't even opened their eyes to love. In fact, Zai did hear it. At this moment, he was mumbling to himself angrily, "Damn it, it's really difficult to stick these two pieces of paper together and paint them pink. I'm so angry." The sea of fire in the spiritual world was stirred up by this sentence. It seemed to show her anger. "For the love of these two children, I have to work harder." Zai sighed helplessly and pulled his long hair gloomily. He said in a muffled voice, "The revolution hasn't succeeded yet. Comrade, you still have to work harder." Lan Shiner hugged her legs and put her head on her knees. She tilted her head and looked at Xian. After a long time, she said, "The so-called love, I think, is to be willing to do anything for that person. In your heart, you always think of that person." Xian heard this and felt even more confused. He raised his head slightly and looked at the sky. "You're still young. When you grow up, you'll know." Lan Shiner, who knew her real age, smiled faintly. Although she wasn't that old, and saying this seemed a little old-fashioned, although she hadn't really lived that long, her soul had flowed with the flow of time for a long time. She still had some experience. At least, her mind was no longer that of a teenager. Lan Shiner patted Xian's head and said with a smile, "Also, don't be in a daze here for too long. Brother Nuashing will be worried. You don't want him to be sad with you, right?" After he finished speaking, he took out the crystal ball and immersed his consciousness into it once again, leaving Ziyen alone at the side to meditate. Hearing this, Xian stared blankly at the sky. A seabird circled alone in her line of sight. She didn't know if it was looking for land or flying aimlessly in the sea. "Sister Xian, I believe that one day, you will understand your feelings for a little boy." Suddenly, she recalled what Yuan Qian had said to her. Her perplexed expression cleared up a little as she looked at the clear sky and sighed. Time can settle everything and wash away all the impurities. Then let time prove everything. Seeing her slightly relaxed eyebrows, Yun Nuashing breathed a sigh of relief. He patted his chest with some lingering fear. It seemed that Lan Shiner had temporarily stabilized Xian. Nuashing, sister-in-law is very difficult to deal with. Seeing him like this, Yuan Shi looked at Xian and laughed sinisterly. What the hell?" Yun Nuashing, who was originally absent-minded, although he did not listen to what he said seriously, he subconsciously nodded his head. The moment he reacted, his expression suddenly changed, his eyes widened, and he realized that he seemed to have casually admitted to something incredible. Tisk, tsk, tsk. Seeing this, Yuanshi couldn't help but smack his lip. He shook his head and smiled. Nothing. The night silently descended, and the two bright full moons slowly climbed to the top of the sky, casting a light purple radiance down. Together with the endless starlight on the horizon, the whole world seemed gorgeous and colorful. Watching the bright starry sky and moonlight on the empty ocean was a special feeling. The purple light shone on the handsome face. Yun Nuoshing slowly woke up from her cultivation state. She gently opened her eyes. A ray of light flashed through them. Seeing that the entire ocean had turned purple, she sighed softly. Unknowingly, it's the purple night again. She slowly stood up and leaned against the side of the boat. Looking back, she found that everyone was cultivating. After observing for a while and finding that there was no problem, she carefully glanced at Xian. Seeing that she was sleeping soundly against the side of the boat, she couldn't help but be stunned. Looking left and right and seeing that no one was awake, she nodded and tiptoed over. Taking off her black windbreaker, she gently covered Ming with it. Then, she tiptoed back and put a coat over him before walking back to the side of the boat. The long journey, the endless time, is the path I'm taking really correct? Suddenly remembering something, Yun Nuoshing was a little confused. He didn't know if the path he had chosen was correct. The path ahead was difficult and complicated, and he couldn't even see any signs of it. However, after a while, his gaze became firm again. Looking at the distant cluster of galaxies in the sky, he couldn't help but laugh. It must be correct. Suddenly, Yun Nuoshing felt a small hand patting his shoulder. He couldn't help but be stunned for a moment. Thinking that it was Lon Sheener, he slowly turned around. The smile on his face instantly froze, and even his body was petrified at this moment. Why are you awake? Yun Nuoshing laughed dryly and scratched his head. His gaze was a little unnatural, because the person in front of him was none other than Xian, who had an awkward kiss with him today. At this moment, Xian was staring at him without blinking. The two pairs of eyes were parallel to each other, and he didn't know what to do. Tightening her windbreaker, Xian looked at him and said softly, "I'm not asleep." Yun Nuoshing was stunned for a moment. Scratching his head, he glanced at the sky and said, "It's so late. Aren't you sleeping?" "I can't sleep." Xian shook her head. She spread her long hair and let it dance in the wind. Leaning against the edge of the boat, Mei Mao stared at the purple sea in a daze. Seeing her like this, Yun Nuoshing didn't know what to say. He could only stare at the sea. The two of them didn't speak, and the atmosphere was a little strange. It was very depressing, and the usual harmony was gone. The silver and purple boat gently parted the waves. Behind the boat, the waves rippled for a few meters before returning to normal. The two of them were reflected in the water. They looked a little indifferent, and there was no trace of expression on their faces. After a long time, Xian suddenly turned around and looked at Yun Nuoshing. She whispered, "Xing Xing." Yun Nuoshing raised his head and turned to look at her. He smiled faintly and said, "What's wrong? Kiss me." Silence. In the air, there was only the buzzing sound of the wind blowing past their ears. At this moment, Yun Nuoshing's world seemed to be collapsing and about to fall apart. What? After a long time, he shuddered. His whole body trembled, his face twitched and his teeth chattered. He looked at Xian in confusion. Seeing him like this, Xian smiled bitterly and shook her head gently. She said, "I said, kiss me." This time it was really clear. However, Yun Nuoshing suspected that he had heard wrongly. He patted his ears hard, and his heart started to beat faster. His worldview was about to be overturned. "Xian, you? Are you confused? Sleepwalking?" Yun Nuoshing swallowed his saliva and took a step back. He laughed dryly. He didn't know why she was suddenly like this. Could it be that she was provoked? Or was she sleepwalking? That was what he thought. However, His gaze couldn't help but fall on those tender and beautiful red lips. Accompanied by the gorgeous moonlight, they looked like a dream and made him feel a little confused. "I'm very awake." Xian smiled faintly and waved her hand. She looked firmly at Yun Nuoxing and said, "I'm serious." Yun Nuoxing was scared. He couldn't help but take a step back. Just as he was about to say something, a lily-white hand wrapped around his waist and pulled him into a soft embrace. He was so scared that he couldn't say anything. "Don't say anything. Kiss me." Xian pulled Yun Nuoxing into her arms. She wrapped her soft arms around his neck so that he couldn't escape. She blinked at Mei Mao, then closed her eyes and moved her small mouth forward. Today was definitely the most frightening day Yun Nuoxing had ever been. There was no other day. He was almost driven crazy. Even when he was caught off guard by Xian Yin's sneak attack, it wasn't as frightening as today. At this moment, his psychological defenses had already collapsed beyond recognition. Yun Nuoxing glanced at her disappointingly. He gritted his teeth and sighed helplessly in his heart. "If I die, then so be it. If I die under a peony, then I'll be a romantic ghost." Yun Nuoxing took a deep breath and wrapped his arms around her slender waist. He glanced at Xian one last time. He slowly lowered his head, stretched his neck, and opened his mouth slightly. He kissed Xian's cherry lips. Chapter 306. The moonlight was enchanting, and the stars were shining brightly. On the silver boat, the two figures were pressed tightly together. Even the moonlight dimmed at this moment, and the cloudless sea suddenly became much darker. This kiss was different from the previous one, which left them in a daze. During this kiss, both of them carried some inexplicable emotions. This should have been the most touching moment. The surface of the sea was quiet. Even Ziyi, who had witnessed everything in the spiritual world, was very quiet. She didn't say anything. She silently picked up her diary and solemnly wrote down this matter. Looking at her beautiful face that couldn't hide her joy, it was clear that she must have misunderstood. These two people were definitely not doing this out of love. When the moonlight brightened again, the two blushing faces slowly separated. Yun Nuoxing stared at the pair of limpid eyes that were no longer confused and were instead filled with deep affection. She couldn't help but swallow. Although the passion just now had some inexplicable components, it didn't affect its own meaning. It successfully seduced the two of them. With the help of the moonlight, Yun Nuoxing clearly saw the person in her arms. Her heart trembled violently. Xian's eyes were misty, and her eyes were like silk. She had lost a trace of elegance and gained a touch of charm. Under the illumination of the purple light, she was so beautiful that it was suffocating. His body trembled, and Yun Nuoxing slapped himself in his heart. He hurriedly took a deep breath and tried his best to calm his chaotic emotions. Gently stroking her soft hair, Yun Nuoxing couldn't help but ask, "That little girl, can you give me a reason?" Hearing this, Xian's delicate body trembled. She lowered her head very low, almost burying it in Yun Nuoxing's chest. After fidgeting for a long time, she muttered softly, "A little, Yun Nuoxing tidied up Xian's long hair and asked softly, "A little what?" "A little. I want a little. I want to find an answer." Xian shook her head. Her face was red, as if she didn't want to say it. Seeing her like this, Yun Nuoxing smiled bitterly. What kind of question was this? He couldn't help but pat her head and say, "Silly girl, even if you want an answer, you don't have to do it this way." Hearing this, Xian shook her head gently and said, "I think this is the fastest way to get an answer, all right. Do you have an answer now?" Yun Nuoxing smiled bitterly. He didn't argue with her and asked directly. Xian tilted her head and looked at him. Then, she tilted her head to the other side and looked behind him. Then, she looked directly at the sky. After a long time, she slowly focused her gaze on Yun Nuoxing. She blinked her Mei Mao and said uncertainly, I do, but I also don't think so. Hearing this, Yun Nuoxing rolled his eyes. Just as he was about to say something, he realized that the two of them were in an extremely intimate position. His handsome face blushed, and he tried to struggle out of her embrace. After a while, he allowed her to hug him again. Although Xian didn't say much, he could feel the churning emotions in her heart. It was like a stormy sea, causing him to feel uneasy. Of course, at this moment, he didn't completely calm down. The two of them were tightly pressed together, as if they were going to melt together. Of course, there were some places that were touching intimately, which made a certain someone's heart flutter. His breathing became a little erratic, and he hurriedly recited scriptures in his heart. Only then did he not overreact in certain places. Otherwise, it would really be awkward. The two of them hugged each other tightly and listened to each other's heartbeats. At this moment, they only felt that the world was strangely quiet. Only the thumping of their hearts gradually resonated and slowly combined into a gentle and rhythmic heartbeat. "Can I borrow it for one night?" Xian suddenly asked. Yun Nuoxing, who almost fell asleep standing up, was stunned for a moment. Her mind was still in a daze, and her reaction was half a beat slower. Huh! Just as Yun Nuoxing was a little confused, Xian suddenly turned sideways and pulled her gently onto the deck. He glanced at her a little stiff and said softly, "Go to sleep." After that, he directly closed Mei Mao. Yun Nuoxing suddenly felt that the world was filled with snowflakes. At this moment, her expression was incomparably horrified and funny, as if she had heard something terrifying. "Hey, hey, hey! Little girl!" At this moment, Yun Nuoxing couldn't care about anything else. Her handsome face was pale, and she hurriedly reached out a hand, shook Xian, and called out softly. Phew! However, Xian ignored her. There was a faint sound of calm breathing, as if she had fallen asleep. Yun Nuoxing suddenly felt that her worldview had been kicked upside down. "Miss, you're so fragrant. How do you want me to sleep? If this goes on, my mind will be distorted." Seeing her like this, Yun Nuoxing wailed in her heart. A pleasant fragrance wafted from Xian's body. Although it made him feel quite comfortable, it was hard to guarantee that he wouldn't think too much about it. In any case, he was a little boy who had developed normally. If this kind of thing happened too often, his mind would become perverted. First, there was sister, then there was Xianine, then there was Exhilarating, and now even Xian is treating me like a bolster. What the f***ck did I do to deserve this? Yun Nuoxing fiercely ground her teeth. She was so angry that she broke down. She couldn't help but feel sorry for herself. What a sin, what a sin, ah! After hysterically roaring a few times in her heart, Yun Nuoxing finally felt tired. Her heart was tired, and she felt that she wouldn't love again. Then, her head tilted to one side, and she rested her head on Xian's soft and fragrant shoulder, slowly falling asleep. Just as Yun Nuoxing couldn't support her body and mind and fell asleep, Xian gently opened Mei Mao. She glanced at Yun Nuoxing, who was breathing calmly, and touched his head with her lily-white hand. She turned her head and looked at the vast starry sky. She couldn't help but sigh. Biting her red lips, Xian looked at Yun Nuoxing, who even showed signs of fatigue in his sleeping posture. She felt a little sorry for him. She raised her head slightly, put her mouth next to his ear, and whispered as if she was sleep-talking, "Xing, I'm sorry. I don't want to tell you the answer yet." After she finished speaking, she looked at him again. Her lily-white hand wrapped around Yun Nuoxing's long, dark purple hair that fell in front of her. Her red lips gently pressed against Yun Nuoxing's mouth. After a long time, she released him. She wrapped one hand around his waist and fell into a deep sleep. The next morning, when a faint light lit up in the east, half of the sea was illuminated in orange. When a ray of light shone on Yuan Shi's face, Yuan Shi's eyelids trembled, and he slowly opened his eyes. He looked at the two suns that rose one after the other, stretched lazily, and yawned loudly. His gaze shifted, and he almost jumped into the sea. With dead fish eyes, Yuan-Shi looked at the two figures in the distance. They were covered in black windbreakers, and they were stuck together. Instantly, he felt that his HP bar was about to be emptied. Cough. This public display of affection. I give it full marks. He coughed painfully. Yuan-Shi felt his heart hurt, his mind hurt, his liver hurt, and his whole body hurt. He trembled as he wiped away the non-existent blood at the corner of his mouth. Then, he couldn't help but look at the two of them. He realized that Yun Nuoxing and Yun Nuoxing were sleeping peacefully, as if they had found something that could comfort their souls. Pausing, Yuan-Shi saw little Ming kneeling quietly at the side. Her eyes were closed, and she seemed to be asleep. He couldn't help but mutter, seriously, did they throw Ming aside to enjoy themselves? After he said that, he walked over. Just as he was about to put Ming down, he realized that the latter suddenly opened her eyes and stared at him with her lively little eyes. Shoo, don't disturb Big Brother and Yun Nuoxing. Ming put her little hand to her mouth and smiled sweetly, revealing a mouthful of pearl-like white teeth. She looked very cute. Lan Xiner's figure silently appeared at the side. She looked at the few of them, and then looked at Xian, whose pretty face seemed to be filled with happiness. She smiled and said telepathically, "Go away, Brother Nuoxing and Yun Nuoxing are about to wake up. It's not good to scare them." After she said that, Ming and Yun Nuoxing nodded and tiptoed away, pretending that they hadn't seen anything. When the two suns chased each other up to the sky, a warm aura filled the entire world. Yun Nuoxing and Ziyan, at this moment, opened their eyes at the same time. Their four eyes looked at each other. For some reason, the two of them actually laughed. A hearty laughter and a light laughter intertwined together. It was very cheerful. After laughing for a while, Yun Nuoxing rubbed Xian's head and said, "Little girl, what are you laughing at? Little Star is the one laughing. Why are you laughing all of a sudden?" When Xian heard that, she curled her lips in amusement and smiled sweetly. When they heard that the two of them had suddenly become much more intimate, Lan Xiner and the other two were stunned. They didn't know what had happened last night to cause such a change. It seemed that the relationship between the two of them had become much closer. Although they didn't know what the specific relationship was, no matter what the two of them said, Yuan-Shi didn't think that it was just a simple friendship. Of course, the three of them didn't walk over. They just stood at the side and looked at the sea silently with an expression that said, "I didn't hear anything." At the same time, they used energy to cover their ears and deliberately created a secret space that belonged to Yun Nuoxing and Yun Nuoxing. Mei Mao glanced at them secretly. When she saw Yuan-Shi and Yun Nuoxing's expressions, she couldn't help but chuckle in her heart. Then, she looked at Yun Nuoxing and blinked her bright eyes. She pulled him up and hesitated for a while. Then, she said softly, "Xing, last night, I seemed to be too willful and embarrassed you. I'm sorry." Even though Yun Nuoxing's ears were sharp and his hands were fast, he couldn't cover Xian's cherry lips in time. Those 3 words floated out perfectly. He couldn't help but sigh softly. Yun Nuoxing patted her head and smiled indifferently. "What's there to apologize for? Actually, I took advantage of you this time. I should be the one apologizing." Ziyan's long and slender eyelashes trembled twice when she heard this. She shook her head and was just about to say something when a warm hand directly covered her small mouth. The following words directly caused a wisp of red to spread from her slender jade neck all the way to the tip of her delicate ears. But speaking of which, last night's kiss was really alluring. It was a kiss from a beauty. As expected, it was soul-stirring and made my heart palpitate. Even I was a little tempted. By the way, it was so soft and fragrant. Yun Nuoxing said with a sinister smile. He said some things without any shame. He couldn't help but lick his lips when he saw her shy and alluring appearance. Xian's pretty face turned even redder when she saw him like this. Her head was so hot that it felt like it was going to burn. Her vision became a little blurry, and she could even see a few wisps of white smoke drifting out from the top of her head. Bad Xingxing, are you addicted? Xian whispered as she moved his hand away. She wanted to break free from Yun Nuoxing's embrace, but found that she couldn't use any strength. Ha ha! Yun Nuoxing grinned when he heard that. He nodded and said very seriously, "Little girl, this situation was caused by you. What do you think you should do?" Xian was so embarrassed that she almost fainted when she heard that. She looked like a weak lamb that had fallen into the mouth of a ferocious, hungry wolf. She didn't know what to do. Yun Nuoxing smiled faintly when he saw that she was about to faint. He continued to act like a hooligan without any mercy. He gently wiped his finger across her tender and alluring lips that were so red that it could bleed if he pinched her. Then, he placed his finger next to his mouth and gently tapped it. Xingxing. Yun Nuoxing still didn't stop his crusade against her. Xian really wanted to faint in his arms. Even her heartbeat and breathing became a little chaotic. She thought about it for a while, then fiercely bit her crystal-like white teeth. Yun Nuoxing felt that he had teased her enough and was about to stop. Who knew that in the next moment, a blushing pretty face would suddenly enlarge in front of his eyes. Then, his lips suddenly touched something soft. This time, it was his turn to be dumbfounded. At this moment, Yun Nuoxing's heart felt like there were 1,000 dragons roaring and soaring, and a group of demons dancing wildly. The sky full of fireworks bloomed with mesmerizing colors, and the colorful light drowned the world. Just as the two of them gradually became addicted to it, Yuan Shi, who was by the side of the boat, finally couldn't stand the pink light behind him. He pulled out a handful of his hair and turned his head in grief and indignation. He suddenly opened his mouth and said, "Spare?" Before he could finish, "Spare a single dog like me. Woof woof is also a life." Lan Xiner raised her hand and knocked him out. At the same time, she turned Ming, who was peeking through the gap between her palms, back. Then, she took the two of them and disappeared from the boat in a flash, leaving the two of them behind to spend a beautiful and sweet time together. Ah, it's really a good day. Little Xian, it's about time to wear a red dress or a wedding dress. It's said that the wedding dresses brought by the people from the mortal world are very fashionable and beautiful. Why don't you wear both, one of each? As for the wedding, we'll hold one in the peaceful world. You'll wear a wedding dress and here you'll wear a red dress. In the spiritual world, Ziyi solemnly noted down this matter when he saw the two of them kissing passionately. He had even arranged for the wedding between the two of them. If Yun Nuoxing knew about this, he would probably vomit 3 tons of blood and shout, "Miss, you've misunderstood me. It's really a good day." Chapter 307. The city of the Sea King was located on the only sea in the northern wilderness. Countless ships came and went. It was a true harbor city, a miracle of engineering. The city was not built on land that protruded from the bottom of the sea, but on a huge platform that was rooted in the sea by a huge pillar. It did not contain a trace of energy and was completely man-made. It connected the two areas across the sea like a relay station on the sea. Of course, there was also a very important reason why the city was stationed here. The north was directly connected to the sea where the Tana's water god temple was located. These two seas were connected and had been connected for millions of years. However, the waters of the two seas were not connected because this was the Sea of Life, while the one in the north was the vast Dead Sea, lifeless and lifeless. The city of the Sea King was also the city closest to the Tana's water god temple. Much information about the sea would be discovered by the people here first and then spread out. Therefore, there were also many people from first-class forces stationed here, looking forward to the day when the Tana's water god temple resurfaced so that they could go in and see what kind of place it was. After all, that area of the sea was guarded by a strange energy. Even if a god were to enter, they would not be able to fly. The only way to enter the Tana's water god temple was by water. Therefore, there were also countless strong men guarding this place. It could be said that it was the best place to attack the Tana's water god temple. The stronghold on sea, the city of the Sea King. Has someone been paying attention to this place since so long ago? The silver boat drifted on the sea. Yun Nuoshing looked at the distant horizon and saw a small shadow slowly rising. Then, she looked at the map again and put it away. It's not on the map. Xian sat aside and looked away. He was a little surprised. Yun Nuoshing nodded and could not help but exhale. Even a city built 1,000,000 years ago was not marked on this treasure map. How old was this map? Looking at the blue shadow in the distant sky, Yuan-Shi stretched and said, "Are we finally going to land? I've been drifting on the sea for half a year. Every day, all I see is a blue sea. There aren't many ghosts around. Recently, my knees have been hurting a little. I don't know if it's because of rheumatism." Yun Nuoshing couldn't help but chuckle when she heard that. She also heaved a sigh of relief in her heart. It would be a lie to say that she wasn't bored during this half-year journey. If it weren't for the few people around her who could chat and relieve her boredom, she would have really gone crazy. By then, she probably wouldn't even be able to speak when she got close to the world again. "Brother, I don't want to eat fish anymore. Can we eat something else later?" The happiest person was Ming, the little foodie. For the past 6 months, she had been eating fish. There were all kinds of fish of all shapes and sizes, which made her want to vomit whenever she saw fish. Now that she saw a city, all kinds of delicacies appeared in her little head. Pinching her nose with a smile, Yun Nuoshing said, "Don't worry, Sea King City has dealings with other cities on the mainland, so there will probably be other things brought in. By the way, Ming, can you get down and walk on your own?" Yun Nuoshing patted Ming's head and couldn't help but ask when she saw that she had to curl up in her arms. "No, I just want brother to carry me." Ming frowned and said unwillingly. She even waved her little fists, making everyone not know whether to laugh or cry. "Why, Ming, you've grown up. It's time for you to get down and walk on your own." Yun Nuoshing smiled bitterly. As Ming grew older, her petite body slowly became taller. She was about 11 years old. In just half a year, she had grown a lot taller. She was no longer a child who could curl up in other people's arms. Looking at her now made everyone feel that she was having a hard time. "I don't want to," Ming shook her little head. "That's why." Yun Nuoshing smiled bitterly. "I just don't want to." That's exactly why. After arguing for a long time, Yun Nuoshing finally compromised. She suddenly felt that life was a tragedy. However, looking at Ming's happy face in her arms, this thought was instantly erased. She patted her little head dotingly and let her be. As Yun Nuoshing's boat was made of dragon Xian silver, it attracted the attention of countless people when it entered the harbor. Although they knew that this kind of divine item was out of their reach, it didn't stop some people from yearning for it. The boat gently leaned against the dock. Yun Nuoshing put away the boat and slowly walked into the city under the envious and jealous gazes of the crowd. As little Ming kept complaining about being hungry, the few of them had to find a restaurant to settle down and relieve the emptiness in their stomach. At the same time, they could listen to some information in this crowded place. "I heard that the people of the Yu family have returned to Sea King City. Among them is their goddess. She didn't seem to be here the last time we were here? The Yu family only came to Sea King City to settle down. Haven't you heard about the incident in Lihuan City? It is said that the goddess of the Yu family was involved at that time. They were the ones who went to bring her back. TSK, the goddess of the Yu family is really unlucky about the incident in Lihuan City. She went there at this time. She is really lucky to be able to come back alive. Sigh, she went to that city by accident. It is said that she brought some stones to the world to show them to the world, but it didn't seem to have any result. Speaking of which, the prohibition of the water god temple in Tanas is about to be broken. The people of the Yu family will probably get involved. Logically speaking, many forces will get involved. Not long after sitting down, Yun Nuoshing heard some information that shocked her. She was stunned almost instantly. The Yu family? Hearing this family, Yun Nuoshing suddenly remembered the black stone in the pendant. There was a word, Feng, written in the language of the gods on it, which made her very interested. However, the other parts of the stone were taken away by the goddess of the Yu family. Now that she was here, she suddenly became excited. Seeing Yun Nuoshing's suddenly interested expression, Ziyen knew what he was thinking. He knew that Yun Nuoshing was still thinking about that piece of black stone, and he couldn't help but chuckle as he said softly, "Do you want to go over now?" Hearing this, Yun Nuoshing looked at little Ming, who was wolfing down the food as well as Yu Yin. She shook her head and said, "Let Ming eat his fill first. Hee, I'm not in a hurry. Take your time." Suddenly, Yuan Shi excitedly said something that made everyone feel confused. An hour later, outside the immortal stone square, Yun Nuoshing and the others were watching from afar. The entrance was completely surrounded by a large group of people. Many people ran over to watch. They looked up and couldn't wait to fly in. Why is it so exaggerated? Looking at the line that was almost 1,000 meters long, Yun Nuoshing couldn't help but touch his face and laugh dryly. He didn't expect so many people to gather in the immortal stone square, and they were all here for the goddess of the Yu family. The Yu family was also one of the 8 great ancient families. There was no need to say more about their reputation. However, their reputation was a bit mysterious. Because the Yu family was one of the 8 great ancient families, it was a very mysterious and low-key family. It didn't come out for a long time and stood aloof from worldly affairs. If it wasn't for the fact that it came out 1,000,000 years ago, the world wouldn't know that there was such a force in the god realm. It was also from that day onwards that the original 7 great ancient families became the 8 great ancient families, and this family was known as the one that was most fond of the spiritual energy of heaven and earth. In the family there were more women than men. The women in the family were all beautiful. It was called a heaven-like place by the young people in the world. Many young people wanted to marry into the Yu family or marry a fairy from the Yu family. However, not many people could do it, not even the other 7 great ancient families. Craning his neck to watch from 1,000 meters away, Yun Nuoshing couldn't help but shake his head. There were so many people, when would they be able to go in? Of course, he wasn't going for the goddess of the Yu family. His only target was the black stone that the goddess had taken out. He was very curious whether the other black stone had any engravings of the divine era's characters. If we continue to squeeze like this, we won't be able to go in no matter what. In fact, the reason why a group of people are stuck here is because the Yu family won't let them go in. Even if they can squeeze to the entrance of the immortal stone shop, they won't be able to go in. Seeing his anxious look, Yuan Shi couldn't help but chuckle. "You have a way?" Hearing this, Yun Nuoshing raised his eyebrows and asked. Hee. Yuan Shi smiled mysteriously and waved his hand, saying, "Follow me." After saying this, he directly left. Yun Nuoshing and the others looked at each other and hurriedly followed him. After making many turns and avoiding the crowd, Yuan Shi led them straight to the side door of the immortal stone shop. Surprisingly, there wasn't a crowd here. It was empty except for 2 young girls with swords hanging from their waists. Seeing Yun Nuoshing and the others coming over, the 2 pairs of bright eyes looked over. "2 young masters, please stop." One of the girls took a step forward and said in a clear and melodious voice. "It won't work." Yun Nuoshing heard this and shrugged. Then, he looked at Yuan Shi, not knowing what he was planning. "Wait, where did you put that thing?" Yuan Shi curled his lips and then rummaged through his clothes. He didn't know what he was looking for, but his clothes were very messy and he looked very embarrassed. "Oh, here it is." In the end, he took out a white token from the ring on his finger. There was a majestic energy hidden in the depths of the token, which surprised Yun Nuoshing. Yuan Shi walked forward and waved the white token in front of the two girls. This. Young master, please come this way. The two girls were stunned and went forward to take a look. Their expressions suddenly changed and they hurriedly invited them in. They even leisurely led the way in front. Yun Nuoxing felt a little strange. She didn't know what the token was and asked curiously. A grand elder of the Yu family left this token when he came to the Yuan family as a guest. It is said that you can enter and leave some places in the Yu family and use the portal for free, Yuan Shi said with a chuckle. The courtyard in the immortal stone shop was very quiet. The noise outside couldn't be heard at all. The surrounding trees were swaying vigorously with vitality. The cool spring breeze swept by and it felt cool. After passing through a tree-lined path, there was a small lake in front of them. It was so clear that one could see the bottom, and it reflected the surrounding forest. There was also a small pavilion. There was a faint immortal energy lingering there. It was hazy and invisible. It was hidden between the dense trees. The sound of a pipa flowed between heaven and earth like the sound of nature. It was subtle, gentle, and full of charm. There was a small pavilion by the lake that was hard to detect. It was hidden at the intersection between the forest and the lake. More than half of the pavilion was covered and the pipa sound was coming from there. In the small pavilion, there was a beautiful and otherworldly woman holding a pipa. Her jade-like hands were dancing lightly. She wore a dress as white as snow and her jade-like hands were sparkling like snow. She was tall and her fine black hair was casually draped behind her back. It was casually tied up by a white hairband. Her petite face had a seductive aura. She was absolutely beautiful no matter how one looked at it. Young Mississippi, the young girl who had been leading the way for Yun Nuoxing and the others bowed to the woman and said respectfully. Then, she made an inviting gesture to them. Yuan Shi casually led the others to sit down by the pavilion. Then, he stared at the woman with interest, causing the young girl to be at a loss. Suddenly, the pipa sound stopped and the woman chuckled. She opened her eyes slightly and looked at Yuan Shi who was laughing foolishly. Her clear voice slowly echoed in the small pavilion. It has been more than 10 years since we last met. Brother Yuan Shi, how have you been? Chapter 308. The woman's voice was very special. It contained a strange power with a little bit of magnetism. It was very hazy, but people couldn't help but have a good impression of her. Yun Nuoxing heard his words and couldn't help but be stunned. She secretly glanced at Yuan Shi and found that he was looking at the woman in front of him calmly. There was an unconcealable joy in his eyes. Even the young girl was a little surprised. She didn't know the relationship between her family's young miss and this person in front of her. TSK, this little girl is becoming more and more beautiful. After looking for a long time, Yuan Shi couldn't help but laugh. He then looked at Yun Nuoxing and the others and said with a smile, "This is Yu Xiao. We met when we were young. Xiao is my fiancé." Yun Nuoxing heard this and couldn't help but spit out a mouthful of water. She stared at him in disbelief. What was going on? However, she also understood why Yuan Shi was so excited when he said that he was looking for the goddess of the Yu family. It turned out that he was excited because he wanted to see his fiancée. Many young people thought that marrying a fairy of the Yu family was a special honor, not to mention the goddess. However, no one had ever gotten their wish. If the news spread out that the goddess of the Yu family was already engaged, the young talents of the world would probably be heartbroken. Maybe there would be people who would fight Yuan Shi to the death. Yu Xiao heard this and her pretty face turned red. Her jade-like fingers lightly plucked the strings of the pipa. She rolled her eyes at Yuan Shi and said coquettishly, "Brother Yuan Shi is really too much. So many years have passed and you are still like this. These are only temporary. If you can't meet the requirements of the sect elder, all of this is just empty talk. I can't change anything. I am working hard. 300 years to reach the initial god level. It will be very fast. I am not even 30 yet. Yuan Shi let out a hollow laugh. Then, he stuck out his chest and said proudly. Of course, he had such confidence. The growth speed of the god spirit body was like flying a plane. It was said that he could reach the height of the god spirit body. Even the initial god level would not be able to stop him. Yun Nuoxing looked left and right, then nudged Yuan Shi with her elbow. She couldn't help but say, "You're always yelling that I'm abusing single people. In the end, you're already a married man. Are you abusing me or am I abusing you? I'm still single." As soon as she said this, Yuan Shi's smile froze. Yu Zhao's pretty face flushed red, and Yun Nuoxing couldn't help but smack her lips. Looking at the two of them, even if they didn't have an engagement, they probably wouldn't be able to stop them. But Xiao Xiao is not by my side. I'm always envious of you. Nuoxing, why are you still single? Aren't there 2 women beside you? Yuan Shi smiled awkwardly. Then, he suddenly changed the topic and looked at Xian and Lan Xiner. Yun Nuoxing rolled her eyes and didn't say anything. Xian was a little shy, but she didn't say anything either. It was as if she had agreed, which made Yuan Shi laugh even more. Yu Xiao waved her hand and asked the girl to leave. Then, she looked at Yun Nuoxing curiously. Mei Mao turned around. When Yuan Shi saw her like this, he quickly introduced, "This is Yun Nuoxing." Ha ha, Xue Er's curse was lifted by his help. Xiao Xiao, you can call him Nuoxing. You don't have to treat him as an outsider. Xue Er's curse was lifted? Yu Xiao was stunned. Then, she smiled happily and said to Yun Nuoxing, "Brother Nuoxing, you are really a genius. Back then, the elders went to see Xue Er, but no one could lift her curse. I didn't expect that you would lift it. I was just lucky." When Yun Nuoxing heard this, he waved his hand and didn't say anything. He looked at her and said, "This time, I came to the Immortal Stones Square to ask you something. Please say. If I know something, I will not hide it." Yu Xiao nodded. Her magnetic voice sounded softly. Seeing that she agreed, Yun Nuoxing directly took out the black stone and carefully put it on the ground. Then, he looked at Yu Zhao's surprised expression and told her the purpose of his visit. This black stone was indeed found by the Yu family. I took one of them on a tour in order to unlock the secret of this black stone. After listening, Yu Xiao nodded and said, "This black stone has been cut open. There is an ancient text inside. However, we asked some ancient scholars to look at it, but they didn't have any clue. Can you show it to me?" When Yun Nuoxing heard this, he laughed secretly. It was the language of the gods. In the world, except for him, only Lan Xiner could recognize this language. "Of course, there is no problem." Yu Xiao nodded. She stood up and led them to the small attic. The black stone was now placed in the attic for the world's geniuses to see and wait for someone to decipher it. The inside of the pavilion was more like a teahouse. In the hall on the first floor, there were many people drinking tea and discussing the Tao. If one looked carefully, they would realize that the people present were all people with brains. Those who could stay here were not people with simple identities. The hall was facing the small lake. The scenery was very pleasant. On the terrace of the hall, there were several strange stones. The one in the middle was a little different. It was a pure black stone, shaped like an arrow. Next to it, there was a similar stone. It seemed that the 2 stones were from the same stone, but they were cut open. On the surface of one of the stones, there was a strange symbol engraved on it. However, these stones were covered by a curtain, as if it was not time to open yet. Why hasn't the goddess of the Yu family appeared yet? Was she injured in the Lihuan city, and is now recuperating in seclusion? Sigh, I came here with the idea of seeing the goddess. If I can't see her, it will be a pity. Coming to the Sea King city at this time, I'm afraid it's not as simple as just traveling. In my opinion, the Yu family is also here for the Tana's water god temple. That magical place has attracted the attention of many strong cultivators. Do you think the divine body of Na Ling will come here? The divine body of Na Ling only needs to constantly absorb energy to cultivate. Even the condensation of elements is very easy. She will most likely come to a place like the Tana's water god temple, right? Everyone was guessing. Their eyes were faintly looking at the second floor. They were all hoping that the fairy in their hearts would come out and show her face so that she could respond to their expectations. And when they were discussing, they inexplicably discussed Yun Nuashing. Hey, now that the divine body of Na Ling is being watched by the whole world, it is impossible for her to come out. If she comes out, I will personally take her origin. Hearing these arrogant words, everyone was stunned and quickly turned their eyes. They could not help but be stunned when they saw that the person who spoke was a man in black. With the strength of the people present, they could naturally see the cultivation of this man. He was an expert of the half-demon level. To reach this level at such a young age, he was already considered a talent of his generation. Are you so confident that you can take down the divine body of Na Ling? In the past, the Qi family tried to take him down, but he escaped. How can you take him down? However, although he was talented, not many people were optimistic about him. The battle between the divine body of Na Ling and the Qi family in the Divine Sky City had spread throughout the 5 regions. Almost everyone knew about it. The divine body of Na Ling can't do it. Hearing this, the man sneered and said, "Since ancient times, there have been a total of 8 divine bodies of Na Ling, but none of them have reached the level of great accomplishment. This 9th generation can't do it either. He can only be a stepping stone under my feet." Moreover, in the past, the divine body of Na Ling did fight with the Qi family, but in the end, the divine body of Na Ling fled. What ability does a person who only knows how to run have? He only has an invincible body. After saying this, the man sneered again. The news spread by the Qi family was more or less glorifying themselves, and the people who saw it that day couldn't tell the truth out of consideration for the Qi family's reputation. As the rumors spread, it became more and more ridiculous. Just as the crowd was about to continue their discussion, a voice that was like the sound of nature was gently transmitted into everyone's hearts, tugging at their heartstrings. It had a strange magical power. Yu Xiao, who was the focus of everyone's attention, finally slowly walked into the hall from the 2nd floor. She wore a half-mask on her pretty face, giving her an extremely mysterious appearance. Until she spoke softly, many people woke up from their daze and heard what she said. The Yu family had displayed a few stones for everyone to comment on, especially the black stone. If anyone could decipher it, the Yu family would reward them handsomely. As for Yun Nuashing and the others, they took advantage of the fact that everyone's attention was focused on Yu Xiao and quickly slipped down from the 2nd floor. It would be fun if they were discovered. Under Yu Xiao's signal, a few white-clothed girls who were originally standing beside the stones pulled down the curtain. Many people gathered around to observe the stones, wanting to understand what was going on. The man in black, who was standing at the front, looked at the black stone and smiled faintly. He said, "Fairies of the Yu family, if I can decipher the words on the black stone, what is the reward? We can satisfy some of your wishes, but not too much." The white-clothed young girls softly replied, startling everyone. What if his wish was to annihilate a certain family? What would they do? I wonder if this wish includes your divine lady? The man in black laughed evilly and looked at the graceful figure on the 2nd floor. Is this guy here to cause trouble? Does he want to die? The divine lady will not marry outside the family. The Yu family will not agree to this condition. Many people looked at the black-clothed man with murderous eyes, but the latter acted as if he didn't see them. He just stared at Yu Xiao, who was on the 2nd floor, and then looked at the girls in white in front of him. The girls were not angry and just shook their heads faintly. "Yuan Shi, your wife is in danger," Yun Nuashing laughed and said as she nudged Yuan Shi, whose face had turned black. Hearing this, Yuan Shi's face twitched. She forcefully suppressed the anger in her heart and glared fiercely at the man in black. She clenched her fists and said angrily, "Damn it, give me a choice, and that is to beat him up. How dare he steal my wife? Does he not want to live anymore? However, I really know what the words on the stone are. Is there no room for discussion?" The man in black did not give up and smiled faintly. Many people wanted to leave a shoe print on his face. Yu Xiao glanced at him and did not say anything. She turned around and left. Many people laughed. Looking at her, it was obvious that she was not interested in men. How boring. When the man saw this, he snorted lightly. He flung his sleeves and left without looking back. The people behind him were unwilling to let him go and started shouting. "Hey kid, don't you know what the words mean? Why did you leave without saying anything? He is still thinking about the divine lady. He must be crazy." Yun Nuoxing looked at the man leaving. Her evil spirit eye was activated involuntarily. She took a look and her body trembled. Everyone was a little surprised. Little star. Xian pulled his sleeve, not knowing what happened. Yuan Shi also looked over curiously. That guy, he really knows what the words mean, Yun Nuoxing frowned. The second stage of the evil spirit I saw through his thoughts. He clearly saw that he was thinking about the word Tian. Moreover, through his own eyes, he clearly saw that it was the word Tian written by the gods. Soul family? I didn't think that there would be someone who knows these words. Yun Nuoxing murmured. Through that person's memory, he saw the power he belonged to. This made everyone stunned. They were at a loss. Obviously, they had never heard of this family. "Brother Yuan Shi, you guys come up. I have asked someone to bring the black stone." Suddenly, Yu Xiao transmitted his voice to them, which made Yun Nuoxing slightly happy. He hated crowded places the most. Okay. Chapter 309. In a small room in the attic, several people were surrounding the arrow-shaped black stone. Yu Xiao sat next to Yuan Shi and looked at Yun Nuoxing curiously. Yun Nuoxing's mouth was wide open, and she had a look of disbelief on her face. Is this really the Kanagami language? Yuan Shi couldn't help but ask as he touched the black stone. When they had just arrived, Yun Nuoxing had said the word out loud. Both of them were stunned. The mythological era, the era that had disappeared from the gods' world, still had some traces left behind. I just didn't expect that other than me and Brother Nuoxing, there would be someone else who could recognize the Kanagami language. Lan Xiner, who was sitting back to back with Yun Nuoxing, said with a sigh. At the beginning, she had thought that only she and Yun Nuoxing knew the Kanagami language. She had a feeling that they were old friends. She didn't expect that there would be another family that could recognize the language. She didn't know what to say. Yuan Shi, who was next to her, opened his mouth wide again. He stared at Lan Xiner for a long time before he said, "Are you from the mythological era?" It was no wonder that he was so surprised that his mouth was about to dislocate. In the past 6 months, he didn't know anything about this mysterious figure. The two of them didn't talk much. After all, they didn't have much interaction. It wasn't wrong to say that they had accompanied each other for a long time. Today, when he heard Lan Xiner say this, he suddenly felt dizzy. Yu Xiao also felt that it was a little unreal. That era that had turned into ashes, that era that had already disappeared without a trace, had actually pulled out a person today? What the F***ck? This was what Yu Xiao and Yuan Shi were thinking at this moment. Even though they had good temperaments, they still didn't come back to their senses for a long time. They stared blankly at Black Stone and Lan Xiner, speechless for a long time. That's why I recognize this language. I also feel that it's very strange, Yun Nuoxing said as she spread out her hands. Brother Nuoxing, you have the blood of the gods in your body. It's not surprising that you can recognize the Kanagami language, Lan Xian said helplessly as she bumped his shoulder with her head. Gulp, when Yuan Shi heard this, he swallowed hard and stared at Yun Nuoxing, who had spread out her hands helplessly. What's going on? Blood of the gods? Descendant of gods? Why did he suddenly feel that his brother was a little too mysterious? Receiving godly divine body and descendant of gods? Nuoxing, you. Yuan Shi opened her mouth to speak, but found that she couldn't say anything. Yu's face's head, Yun Nuoxing's ss, and hers eyes. Yu Xiao touched her dizzy head and calmed down after a long time. She blinked her Mei Mao and suddenly smiled brightly. She looked at Yun Nuoxing and said, I wonder if little brother Nuoxing is interested in marrying into the Yu family? When the others heard this, they were all stunned. Before Yun Nuoxing could react, Xian frowned as if she was afraid that Yun Nuoxing would be taken away. She hugged him and stared at Yu Xiao, saying, No! When she did this, the others were stunned again. Yuan Shi couldn't help but pat Yu Xiao's head and smile helplessly, saying, Xiao, don't mess around. Sister-in-law will be unhappy. When she heard this, Yu Xiao's face turned red and she stuck out her tongue. She looked at the two and said apologetically, Sister-in-law, I'm sorry. I didn't know about this. Don't be silly. Yun Nuoxing's face turned red. He turned his head and pretended that he didn't see anything. He didn't say anything, as if he was admitting it. However, looking at his expression, he seemed a little helpless. For a moment, Yuan Shi and Yu Xiao couldn't understand what this guy was thinking. Haha, in fact, if you were in other forces there would be a lot of people fighting over little brother Nuoxing. The descendant of gods is said to be born to become gods. The blood of gods is even a priceless treasure. Yu Xiao smiled and explained, I have a feeling that once the news gets out, someone will capture me and make me into medicine. Yun Nuoxing rolled his eyes. God's blood could bring the dead back to life. It could also prolong one's life. It was an excellent material for refining medicine. If this news were to spread, it would be like a human-shaped elixir being spread to the outside world. It would definitely turn the world upside down. In the era where the gods did not appear, the descendants of the gods were a bunch of divine treasures. Let's not talk about this. Yun Nuoxing waved his hand and laughed dryly, saying, Let's see what the relationship between these two stones is. After saying that, he took out the 1-meter-tall black stone and placed it together with the arrowhead. Everyone hurriedly gathered around to take a look. They were also very curious about the origins of these two stones with kamikaze characters on them. When the black stones appeared, the two stones shone together, as if they were breathing rhythmically and resonating with each other. The two words on the stone were also shining at this moment. A strange energy slowly spread out. The others didn't feel anything, but when it fell into the senses of Yun Nuoxing and Lan Xiner, their hearts suddenly twitched. Buzz! There was a slight buzzing sound, and the two black stones suddenly bloomed with a bright light that enveloped the entire room. However, what was surprising was that this light was a pitch-black color. It was so dark that nothing could be seen. In this darkness there was a faint light that flickered. Yun Nuoxing was no stranger to this dark yet bright color. It was circulating in his body repeatedly, as if it was evolving into a galaxy. It was the power of the stars. No, it should be said that it was the power of the stars that connected a galaxy. Buzz! The buzzing sound dissipated, and the bright light caused everyone to quickly close their eyes. After a long time, they felt that the light had disappeared. They quickly opened their eyes, but were stunned for a moment. This is a galaxy. The surroundings were pitch black, but there were endless stars twinkling in the distance. The few of them floated in this dark space, and felt that their bodies were light. They were no longer bound by gravity, but miraculously there was air to breathe. Subconsciously they touched the wall that was supposed to be on their right, but they touched nothing. Even when they stretched out their arms, they still couldn't touch the wall that was close to them. It was as if they were really in a galaxy, which made them a little stunned. Yuan Shi subconsciously grabbed Yu Xiao and took a breath. He was stunned for a moment and said, "This is indeed a galaxy, and there is no gravity. However, why is there air?" "I don't know either." Yun Nuoxing grabbed the three girls so that they wouldn't be separated. He smiled bitterly. "Brother, you are really lucky. You are so lucky." Yuan Shi looked at him. Although it was inappropriate, he couldn't help but tease him. "Get lost," Yun Nuoxing shook his head weakly. Then, he turned his head and looked at the two black stones that were floating not far away. He frowned. At this time, the two black rocks were revolving around an invisible point. The two words were reflected from the inside of the rock. Even the thick rock walls couldn't block them. The light directly penetrated through and manifested in this strange star field. The four words were shining brightly. "Sealed heaven and earth?" Yun Nuoxing was stunned. The last two words were a little dim. The first two words were reflected by the two black stones floating in front of him. He didn't know what it was, but he knew that it should be a place. "Have you heard of this place?" Yun Nuoxing asked as he scratched his head. However, they all shook their heads. Obviously, they didn't know. After all, so many eras had passed. Any place should have turned into ashes or changed greatly. However, even Lon Sheener, who was born in the mythological era, hadn't heard of it. There are no ancient books about the mythological era. Even the Yu family, which is only one era away, has no information about the mythological era. Yu Xiao thought for a long time and shook his head helplessly. Although the Yu family and the other families were called the 8 ancient families, they were actually families that had risen since the remote antiquity era. Because their ancestors had godlike existences, they had the inheritance of godlike existences that had been passed down until now. After all, that era disappeared too completely. The ancestor of the Yu family, who became a seer in his later years, once explored the mythological era. He tried to find the history of the gods. In the end, he suffered a backlash and almost died. There was no result. Yu Xiao said softly. The search was fruitless? Even a seer can't go against the current to find the history? Did the mythological era really disappear so completely? Hearing this, Yun Nuoxing sighed heavily. The last sentence was said very softly. Even the three women on top of him couldn't hear what he said. Looking at the two black stones, he suddenly seemed to see a blurry shadow. He couldn't help but be stunned. No, there are some other words. Yun Nuoxing suddenly opened his evil spirit eye. A purple gold array appeared. This was the sign that he had activated his evil spirit eye to the extreme. Other words? Everyone was stunned. They didn't see anything. Just as they were about to ask, they saw him like this. They held their breaths and stared at him, not daring to breathe. Yun Nuoxing stared intently at those four words. His originally small eyes were now wide open. A moment later, those four words, sealed heaven and earth, became blurry. After swaying for a while, the four balls of light merged together and then slowly separated. They once again turned into four new words. When they stabilized and became clear again, he opened his mouth and said those four words. Celestial God of Chaos. Celestial God. This celestial God wasn't a celestial God. It wasn't a celestial God of beginner God. Usually, those who could be given such a title were supreme beings who had stepped into the rebirth realm. They were gods, existences that surpassed gods. They stood in the clouds and looked down on the 9 heavens and 10 lands. With a single thought, nothing in the world dared to disobey. Only those who had reached that level could use the title of Celestial God. Celestial God of Chaos? When they heard this, they were stunned. However, Yuan Shi and Yu Xiao were slightly stunned. They frowned and fell into deep thought. The two of them sat cross-legged in the starry sky. They seemed to have some impression of this name. Seeing them like this, Yun Nuoxing and the others looked at each other. They wisely kept their mouths shut and looked at them quietly. They wanted to hear what secrets they had. After waiting for a few minutes, the two of them suddenly trembled. Their faces were filled with shock. They stared at Yun Nuoxing as if they had seen a ghost. Together with Ziyi, who hadn't appeared for a long time, they spat out a sentence. The taboo celestial god of the primordial era. When he heard the voice that he hadn't heard for a long time, Yun Nuoxing was stunned for a moment. He suddenly activated his soul power. His soul power churned in his mind and strengthened the connection between him and Ziyi. Although he had a lot to say, he had to see Ziyi first. Ziyi, you've been hiding from me for half a year. It's time for you to come out and meet me. Yun Nuoxing directly rushed in front of the purple-clothed girl, rubbed her head with all his might, and said bitterly. However, when he saw that oval face that was even more bitter than him, he immediately lost his anger. Ziyi was stunned when he saw Yun Nuoxing suddenly appear in front of him. The moment he heard the name, he had an opportunity to take advantage of it. He couldn't even seal himself. He could only snort and turn his face away. He didn't even look at him. Yun Nuoxing smiled bitterly and sat cross-legged in front of her. Anyway, he had to make some things clear this time. The heavenly god of primal chaos, whose real name was Quarter Moon, was once the most outstanding hero of his time. He won every battle and fought his way to the realm of rebirth. He was like a comet that cut across the entire realm of the god. There was no one who didn't know his name. However, one day, he inexplicably died. Many records about him were quickly lost. In less than half a century, no one remembers this heavenly god anymore. If it weren't for the fact that the Yu family was left behind from the ancient era and had some ancient records, I'm afraid that even I wouldn't know about him, Yu Shao said slowly. No one remembers him anymore? Yun Nuoxing's hands trembled. Usually, people who had the strength to become gods were people whose names resounded throughout the world. They should be engraved in the hearts of the people. How could this heavenly god who dominated the 9 heavens and 10 earths be forgotten so easily? I've heard a little about him. The heavenly god of primal chaos and Quarter Moon's names can't be mentioned. After his death, it became an absolute secret in the ancient era. Some of the ancient great forces of the same generation kept their mouths shut as if they were afraid of something. Yuan, she added with a nod. Then could these 2 black stones have been left behind by the heavenly god of primal chaos? Yun Nuoxing rubbed the space between his brows and said, Maybe. Yuan Shi and Ziyi were a little uncertain. They looked at Yun Nuoxing's puzzled expression and said with a wry smile, We're not too sure. Several eras have passed since the ancient era. Many ancient books have disappeared. Even the family's library doesn't have that many ancient books. If the family's elders hadn't mentioned it, we probably wouldn't have known about this. Moreover, after the elders finished speaking, they slapped themselves a few times in fear and said that they had said the wrong thing. They were very nervous and seemed unwilling to talk about it. Ha! Yun Nuoxing's face twitched. How could it be so strange that they had to slap themselves when they spoke? It's not just the wrong thing. They can't talk about it at all. Forbidden heavenly god. Forbidden heavenly god. They already said that it's a taboo. How can they talk about it? This person is basically an existence that has been sealed away. Ziyi couldn't help but sigh at this time. Sealed away? Yun Nuoxing didn't understand. Ziyi glared at him and pulled him into her arms. She ruthlessly ravaged him, making him suffer unspeakably. However, there was nothing she could say at this moment. Letting her vent her anger would be enough to end the Cold War. Yi, I was wrong, 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 I shouldn't have acted so indifferent. Yun Nuoxing cried and apologized with all her might. Her 2 jade hands moved around his handsome face, making him feel pain and pleasure. Ziyi pursed her lips, and her mood unknowingly became much better. She also let go of Yun Nuoxing and lightly opened her red lips, saying, Actually, I only know a little more than those two little dolls. Xian Yu was the most legendary existence in the primeval age. His cultivation was extremely terrifying, and he was invincible in the world. He was born to be a king. However, the past of such a legendary figure was like a blank piece of paper. No one knew about his past. It was as if he had jumped out of a rock. Moreover, he disappeared without a trace in the middle of the primeval age. It was said that someone had seen him in the Ganyuan region, but there were no more records. From that day onwards, the primal chaos god no longer existed in the world. Even mentioning him would cause divine punishment. Heavenly punishment? Yun Nuoxing was shocked. She didn't understand why the mention of a person's name would cause a heavenly punishment. Yes, but I don't know the exact reason. Ziyi nodded and said, Sealed heaven and earth. The heavenly god of primordial age. What's the connection between the two? Yun Nuoxing sighed. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.